Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 1986 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Marlee Matlin won for her performance in Children of a Lesser God. But why did she beat fellow nominees Jane Fonda, Sissy Spacek, Kathleen Turner, and Sigourney Weaver? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 59th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 1986. We'll be discussing how Marlee Matlin won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today, I would say, is a pretty big deal. They are the senior editor and podcaster at Letterboxd, and their writing can be found at Paste Magazine, The Film Stage, The Playlist, Little White Lies. Welcome to the show for the first time, Mitchell Beaupre.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here. I'm a big fan of the show, so I'm very excited to get into like a very crazy lineup this year.
This lineup is
very
cracked,
exciting.
Truly.
Yeah.
So very excited to have you here. But before we talk 1986, let's talk Best Actress as a category. So my first question for you, Mitchell, is what is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
Yeah, it's a tough question because I feel like there are different like levels of it. Like the eras go through. Like I have very specific relationships with specific eras of the Oscars in general. And the 90s is like not an era that I'm crazy for a lot of their like wins and whatever. But thinking about it, I genuinely think my two favorite winners in Best Actress are both from the 90s. They both are women playing cops. Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs and Frances McDormand in Fargo. I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be Jodie. Every time I revisit Silence of the Lambs, I'm more and more impressed with her performance, which is always an impressive performance. But the way that she is able to kind of like exist as an outsider in this universe while slowly integrating into the universe and somehow proving herself more capable than everybody else in that universe, I think is such like a tricky line to navigate, especially in a movie that is existing primarily as a thriller more than a character study or, you know, a big performance piece. And to have like a performance that really stands out in a movie like that, I think takes an extra kind of special something.
Yeah, really, really excellent choice. Hard to argue with that one. Very, very few dissenters with Jodie Foster.
Not a lot of people pushing back against that win. And two, I mean, it's just so cool to like have that be. I mean, the whole story of Silence of the Lambs as like an Oscar, you know, front runner, as one of the three that pulled off the big five is like out of control when it released so early in the year.
In February,
I know. Movie that it is and has the legs that it did. Like, it's just wild to look back and kind of like, especially in the era that we're in now, where 95% of what's going to get nominated is going to come out within the last 2 months of the year. Like, exactly. It's really, what a great story for that. I think that's
part of why people were excited about all the Everything Everywhere wins.
Yeah. And even like Get Out was like a really cool journey to see it just like come out as this one thing and then be so beloved that it just kept those legs like the entire run of the year. And like I remember even like halfway through the year thinking like, well, everybody loves Get Out, but like that's not gonna be like an Oscar movie. Like it's you know, a horror that came out in February as well. And then the award starts coming along and you just start seeing it popping up and it's like, oh, this is like Daniel Kaluuya is literally going to get nominated for an Oscar for this performance.
He's like locked, right? Yeah. It's a shame that thrillers and sci-fi and action needs to be like 5 out of 5 masterpiece for the Oscars to actually pay attention, when, you know, dramas can be extremely mid and get nominations
As we'll talk
You
about
know, every single year.
today.
Well, maybe so. Okay, well, my other question for you, what would the Oscars be without heartbreaking losses, right? So, what would you say is your most heartbreaking loss in this category?
Yeah, I think that like there's definitely a lot of ones where it's like when I think of women who are robbed, I go to a lot of people who weren't nominated, but when I think of like loss, the one that I always come back to immediately is Jill Clayburgh in An Unmarried Woman. I think is one
Mm,
of the greatest performances of all time. Like when you talk about characters, like us watching a character go through this journey of actualizing in front of our very eyes, like I just think that she embodies that so tremendously. And yeah, I love that performance. I love that movie in general. It's the kind of movie that I wish existed more these days. Just like a genuine, like us peeking into that world and seeing her kind of, I love movies about people at, any stage of life where their entire life is kind of, the rug is pulled out from under them and they have to completely like reinvent themselves. And she does that tremendously. I was just watching Kramer versus Kramer again for the first time in like a really long time. And that's kind of a similar one with
yeah.
Hoffman's character. Like what your entire worldview is like you're so locked into like, this is my life, this is my routine, like everything's fine, like nothing's like fantastic, but like everything's fine. And then right at the beginning of the movie it's like, oh, everything's over and now I
Yeah.
have to figure out my shit. And yeah, I love that movie so much. An Unmarried Woman so much. Kramer versus Kramer too, I really like that movie. But An
Yeah.
Unmarried Woman I watched again earlier this year, and like the scene where, I know you just recently, like, I mean, kind of recently talked about it, but the scene
Mhm.
where she's at like it's like the doctor's office, right? And he like makes a pass at her, and she like
Yeah.
clocks him for making a pass at her. Like that's so good.
That is an incredible performance and one that still holds up to this day. I obviously gave it my win that year,
Yeah, I
but
would too.
yes. A shame that we didn't get decades of like great lead caliber performances from Jill Clayburgh. She did
Yeah.
fairly get a few after in the 80s and whatnot, but it just feels like she never quite got to that place again of An Unmarried Woman, which is a shame. Maybe Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of feels like they like had a roster for, the Fondas and the Streeps who like got those kind of roles, and
Yeah,
then they like
Diane
didn't
Keaton.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, Keaton's a great one.
Hmm.
Yeah, and they didn't push too far beyond that. They're like, okay, we've got five that we give these kind of roles to, and that's
Right.
it.
Yes. Excellent picks all around. So let's get into what we're here to talk about today. 59th Academy Awards, the Best Actress nominees were Jane Fonda in The Morning After, Marlee Matlin in Children of a Lesser God, Sissy Spacek in Crimes of the Heart, Kathleen Turner in Peggy Sue Got Married, and Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, with the winner being Marlee Matlin. So before we break down these performances individually, would love to know your thoughts overall on this lineup because it's a corker, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, just on paper, like pound for pound, this is one of the most like diverse lineups of any acting slate, especially Best Actress, I think, where Best Actress, probably more than any other category, tends to go towards a certain kind of film, a very like prestige drama.
Yeah.
And so like having a sci-fi blockbuster in here, like that on its own is wild. But then you have The Morning After, which is like I mean, we'll get into it, but like kind of an erotic thriller, sort of like, it's playing in some weird spaces. And then Peggy Sue Got Married is like this Frank Capra, sort of magical realist picture. And then Children of Lesser God and Crimes of the Heart are more what you would expect of, at least what I would expect
Yeah.
of a, Oscar nominated movie. Certainly of the 80s too. But yeah, it's just such like a versatile group of films being represented, but then also the actresses themselves, like we'll talk about like each of their kind of, history with the Oscars and with like their performance with their careers in general. But I feel like each of them have very like unique kind of trajectories,
Hmm.
and trajectories with the Oscars themselves. And so I definitely think when we were talking about doing one of the years in the 80s, 86 was definitely the 86 films, like that was definitely one of the ones that I think more than anything stood out to me as like one that I think I would have a lot of fun revisiting these movies and like kind of talking about them all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is such a wild lineup. And dare I say, this is the kind of Best Actress lineup that there should be more of, you know?
Yeah, right.
This is like the ideal, in my opinion, of what we should probably aspire to have. Like, this is not like apples and apples. This isn't even
Hmm.
apples and oranges. This is like apples and oranges and grapes and alien goo or whatever the
Yeah.
morning after is. Like, it's just such a wild sort of grab bag of performances here, and
Yeah.
from so different genres. No two are similar, and I don't know, there's just something about this lineup that feels like a real turning point in this
Yeah.
category. Like last
Like,
week we kind of said goodbye to the old school Academy faves like Anne
yeah.
Bancroft, Geraldine Page. We had much more traditional kind of performances and films, and now there's something about this that feels like we're in a new era a little bit.
Yeah, because then you go into like 87 too, which is like Fatal Attraction. I mean, you'll get into it
Yeah.
on the next
Oh
episode, but like
yeah.
Fatal Attraction and Moonstruck and everything, which
Mm-hmm.
feel, definitely like pushing into a new era, I think.
Yeah, and we have three getting their first Oscar nominations here: Marlee Matlin, Kathleen Turner, unfortunately their only Oscar nominations
Yeah.
as of now, and Sigourney Weaver. Yes, we do have Jane Fonda and Sissy Spacek, but, their films, I think, have some kind of strange elements to them, too. Like,
Yeah.
they're not exactly traditional. So there's just something that feels like new blood sort of reinvigorated here. It feels like the kind of lineup that may be even indicative of what, like, both critics and audiences are watching and
Mm.
caring about, especially with the Sigourney Weaver nomination, but, Kathleen Turner, too. We have Marlee Matlin here making history, of course, as the first deaf actress nominated and winning. Still the only deaf actress nominated,
Yeah.
even after all these years. But yeah, this was actually a really fun lineup to watch. I can't always say that watching these movies are
I've
fun.
been watching you on
Um,
Twitter and like Letterboxd kind of like suffering through some of these
two and a
80s
half
lineups for
stars, two
sure.
stars. Yeah.
Yeah. But even this
So
one, it's like the ones that like where I don't love the movie, I still like I wasn't really like zoning out during watching any of these movies, especially like kind
yeah,
of watching them all consecutively. It really is such a fun, like you're dipping into, like you were saying with some of the earlier like 80s lineups, like you are watching very similar movies sometimes, but
yeah,
this one it just feels like you're kind of getting a new a new taste of something each night as we're kind of going through each of them.
yeah, for sure. So I think there's a lot to talk about with literally every single one of these.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get started. Shall we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, we're starting off here with Jane Fonda in The Morning After. Okay, so this is our last Jane Fonda performance that we'll be covering on this Best Actress series, barring any big comeback, fingers crossed. But this is another one where I'm sad to be kind of at the end of a nomination run. This has basically been like my year of Jane, where we
Mm-hmm.
started off talking about her in They Shoot Horses, Don't They, at the beginning of the year, and then here we are at her seventh nomination for The Morning After. But the last time we properly talked about her was for The China Syndrome in 1979. But she was also nominated for the first and only time in Supporting Actress in 1981 for On Golden Pond, which is a big personal and professional moment for her to have that experience with her father. But in the meantime, this big development has happened with Jane, which is that she's now this workout maven. She's releasing this series of exercise tapes, starting with the Jane Fonda workout, which is a massive success. So she's kind of in that phase of her career, but she's also still somewhat active in film and TV. She wins an Emmy for The Doll Maker in 1984. She was in Agnes of God, which we talked about last week. And now here she is in The Morning After, which is this big, bold sort of performance from her, and one that she really took seriously. She talks in her book actually about how she always dreaded doing drunk scenes in film, and she decided to face her fears head on here by playing an alcoholic who is drunk for a lot of the film as a way of kind of challenging herself. So she also researched actresses like Frances Farmer and Gail Russell, who had a lot of troubles of their own. She went to AA meetings. She spoke with alcoholics in her life, all in preparation for this film that is pretty silly. So, The Morning After, it's this murder mystery-ish thriller about a washed-up actress, Alex, played by Jane, whose stage name is Vivica Van Loren, and she's an alcoholic, as I said, and One morning, she wakes up to find the body of a photographer lying next to her who has been stabbed to death. She has no recollection of the night before, and she tries to kind of hide her involvement in the case, and in case she actually did kill him. And she ends up meeting this former cop, Turner Kendall, played by Jeff Bridges, who gets very involved in her life and tries his best to help her, while they also try to get answers as to what happened and who killed this photographer. So yeah, here we go, Mitchell. Let's talk about this. First of all, thoughts on the great Jane Fonda overall and her performance here in The Morning After.
Yeah, I'm a big Jane Fonda fan in general. You mentioned some of the other performances that you've been talking about with her. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? It's one of my favorite movies, period, but I think she's
Yes.
absolutely incredible in it. The China Syndrome. The China Syndrome is like the kind of thing where, like, when I think of Jane Fonda, I think that's probably where I go to first. Like, it's
Hmm.
maybe not my favorite performance of hers. That might be They Shoot Horses, Don't They? But it's, I mean, one, it's a tremendous performance. I think probably my favorite performance in the category for that year. But it's also like, when I think of her, I think of like a very like kind of determined, like poised, like very like no nonsense, like badass, woman. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that she embodies those roles really well. Her being afraid of playing a drunk, I think makes sense because I don't really buy her as washed up alcoholic in this. It's an interesting one where it's like, how much do I fault her with that versus how much do
Right.
I fault kind of the script? And like Lumet just feels like the wrong choice for this movie in so many ways. Like I could never really get a grasp like tonally and even structurally like what this movie was. Like she wakes up with this dead body, and like in which she wakes up in a foreign place with a dead body there. And
Right.
like that's a very interesting premise for a movie, for like a thriller, for like a Hitchcockian kind of, mystery. But there's not really any sense of like fear or like momentum to her trying to like figure out what's going on. The progression of it becomes more like this like sudsy, like daytime, like romance. And it's just like I found myself a lot of the time trying to piece together like what even this movie was supposed to be. There's like really odd comedic beats that I can't tell if they're serious or not. You and me were DMing about the moment where she brings Jeff Bridges back to her place and her fridge has 2 tacos, a jar of olives, and 6.5 jars of mayonnaise, and that's all she
Six
had.
and a half
Six
jars
and a
of
half.
mayonnaise.
Make very specific. I hope that that was in the script as 6.5.
I'm sure it
And
was.
it's like it's a tough movie, but there are still like moments that I think
Mhm.
like, oh, like Jane Fonda is like, this is still, Jane Fonda, where like I don't fully buy her as this wreck of a woman. I don't really buy her as like the kind of panic. I do buy her more as a failed actress who, has a lot of like she feels her age coming and like she wants to be bigger than she is. And so like moments where she's kind of talking about that, I believe that a little bit more. It kind of reminds me of her performance in Youth more recently,
Mm.
which I think is probably the closest that she's gotten to a
Yeah.
nomination since this. It is bizarre realizing that this is, I mean, I know with everything else that her activism and workout stuff, like she took a pretty big break for a while there,
Yeah.
but it was odd kind of reminding myself of her Oscar trajectory and seeing that this was the last nomination. And it's also just fascinating that, I mean, this is certainly something that we could discuss when we talk about like who we think the runner up was, but
Hmm.
like the fact that this is the only nomination that The Morning After got. And we're not just talking about for the Oscars. This is like, if you look on IMDb, this did not get any critics groups love. This got no Golden Globe nominations, like absolutely nothing except for, you will look on IMDb, it says one nomination. It is Jane Fonda's, nomination for this. And it's pretty, that just says a lot about like who she is and her status,
Oh yeah.
in the industry, that like they can see there's no trajectory there for her to get a nomination, but they're like, I mean, we love Jane Fonda in this kind of garbage movie.
Yeah. Look
Let's
what
give
she's
her a
done for
nomination.
us. We're getting in shape because of her.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly.
And also we
And I,
love her again, even though we used to kind of hate her because of her political stuff. But now she's like,
yeah,
oh, we like her now. It's a
Yeah,
weird
she's
relationship.
she's toned that down. She
Yeah,
stopped being as aggressive about it on publicly.
right.
But I don't know. I mean, how did you? I want to talk about the Bridges stuff, but before we maybe dive into that, I want to hear just kind of like some of your thoughts on Fonda here.
Yes. Well, I'm just gonna say this. God bless Jane Fonda. I hope she didn't suffer any back pain for single-handedly carrying this movie on her
Yeah.
shoulders, because this, for me, is actually a prime example of why it's important to emphasize how a movie doesn't have to be good for you to
Hmm.
find a performance worthy of awards attention, because I actually really do like her in the film.
Hmm.
I think it's because she's so committed to this material. And for me, it's such like this grand, almost throwback diva performance, very film noirish almost. It
Yeah.
feels a little bit like an homage to like one of those like Joan Crawford melodramas, or like a Barbara Stanwyck in a way, where she just like totally is enveloping the screen and totally eating it up and gives such an urgency to it. And for me, I do think Jane does play like paranoia and jumpiness pretty well, which is why I do like that beginning segment. I
Hmm.
guess just the first scene, really. I think the first scene is where I'm like, oh, this is very intriguing, but then it kind of just falls apart after that
Yeah.
very first scene. But I think there's just like this gravitas in her
Yeah.
voice and in her screen presence that really does lend itself to sort of just being rattled and trying to figure out what's going on. And she's bringing the drama, seeing the panic set in. It's a lot right off the bat. And,
Yeah.
calling her husband and being like, what do I do? Do I call the cops? It's just like immediately
Yeah.
heightened.
There's this moment where she wakes up and in her place after sleeping, and there's a dead body that's like in her closet, and it just like kind of
Yes.
falls out, and it's like it's a very freaky, like it's like a moment that is a very effective jump scare. I think it really
Yeah.
got me watching it at like 1 in the morning in my apartment. But yeah,
A good time to watch this movie.
yeah,
1 a.m.
exactly. But she's really good at that scene. Yeah, I saw a lot
Yeah.
of I was kind of reading reviews of her performance and everything in this, and a lot of them were comparing her work to her work in Clute. And I definitely
Yeah.
think that that's something that people were trying to manifest in putting her in this role. And
Right.
obviously I think it's better in Clute, but Clute's a phenomenally better movie than this is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think that she was probably channeling quite a bit of that too, and
Hmm.
fusing that in here.
Yeah, the movie around her is doing her no favors. Like
Yeah.
the score is awful. The writing, some of these lines I truly like didn't know how I was supposed to, if I was supposed to laugh or not. Like they also just they're like casually throwing around like these racial slurs that have
I
nothing to do with anything.
the moment that we're introduced to Bridges, he like she just kind of like gets in his car. She's like she's goes to the airport, and then like she leaves the airport, and is just kind of like on the run. She left her car in the middle of like the road and is like apologizing, like,
Hmm.
oh, I went to go fix it or whatever. And then she gets in his car, and like within moments we realize that Jeff Bridges is basically playing like the most racist man alive, and he
Yep.
just keeps doubling down on it. And their dynamic is so strange because she doesn't like agree with him, but she also is just kind of like constantly like teasing, like negging him about it almost, and like
Yeah.
like almost like enabling him to like keep going. And it's so odd. There's this one scene that I wrote down in my notes about where they go back to his place for the first time, and they look at all of these books that he buys, and he buys a lot of books and he doesn't read them, and she tells him like her what her real name is, and he says
Yeah.
that she hasn't wanted to get laid, and so, like he like very aggressively is like, you probably haven't even wanted to get laid in so many years, and then she just like fucks him. And I'm like, what is happening in this scene? Like, what is their dynamic even supposed to be? Like, am I supposed to buy that like that's happening? But the strangest thing about it is that because Fonda and Bridges are so good on screen that even
Yeah.
though his character makes no sense, her character being interested in his character doesn't really make sense to me. They have this like raw sexual chemistry
Hmm.
that I think is actually like genuinely compelling and like really just like magnetic to watch. When they're allowed to like not say the dialogue that's written for them anymore, like it kind of works.
Yes. That's the power of movie stars right there with the two of them, is
Yeah.
that they are able to make that work even when the script is screaming no for the two of them. There's just for me a lot of scenes where I'm just kind of like, trying to find my way to like what the purpose is behind things. Even things like when she's kind of like trying to absolve her guilt at one point and is like talking directly to the dead body and saying like, you know, if I did this to you,
Oh
I
my
didn't
God.
mean it and I'm not a
Yeah.
bad person. I mean, she's saying these things with conviction, but then it's just like she's just doing all this random shit, like putting their phone in the dishwasher and just like, guess that'll clean it. And then him showing up unannounced, Turner, and somehow he found the address from a business card, and she's weirded out, but like not as much as you'd think. And
Yeah.
yeah, dropping her off at her house and her just letting him in. Like
Yeah.
at this point, like I don't know if I believe that even someone of Jane Fonda's caliber, just like her being, you know, I know this is acting, but just it's hard to separate sometimes just how stupid this character is, you know? She can't
Yeah.
really play a stupid person very well, which is
Yeah,
a
I think
compliment. But
exactly. I think that's where like it what I was saying like at the beginning of it of us talking about it where like I just like don't get her in this character because when I think of her I think of the stuff like the China syndrome where like I just
yeah.
she has such like a yeah like a poise to her and such an intelligence to her that even in like 80 for Brady, you know, I think that she's a woman that you can sit down and have like a intellectually stimulating conversation with. And
Hmm.
this, like, I just, yeah, it doesn't make sense for her here. Like, I'm not, this is not denigrating to this actress at all because I think that she's a fantastic actress. But like, I think Melanie Griffith is somebody who could play this kind of a role a lot better, where like I would buy her in the character, and Fonda just doesn't feel quite right for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. But yeah, to your point earlier, I do think when she delves into like her past and her regret and everything, that is the Jane Fonda sweet spot. And talking about how they were grooming her to be the next Vera Miles, and she's
Yeah.
just kind of disillusioned by how her career ended up, and she's just drinking more and more and sort of loosening up. And again, for as bad as some of this material is, I kind of love how fully she just throws herself into it. Like, no use being half assed about it
Hmm.
because, like, this woman's life is in shambles, you know, and she's constantly making the wrong decision at every turn. So she kind of leans into that, just being like a fully sloppy person.
Hmm.
But I don't think she plays it like she's just like a helpless idiot necessarily. She's just kind of loud and wrong, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's her kind of motivating factor.
Yeah, we haven't too talked about her relationship with Raul Julia's character
Yeah.
is fascinating. Like it's he is a hoot in this. He's an
Yeah.
actor I really enjoy, and they have this weird like marriage of convenience. But he like wants a divorce because he's fallen for someone else, and
Yeah.
you're
They're
just like
separated. Right.
kind of
Hmm.
trying to figure out like what's even going on there, and then like you know I mean surprise surprise a twist shows up eventually of like oh the only other noteworthy character has something sinister going on in this movie like it's one of those twists
Yeah.
where it's like yes based on casting and the
The
fact that
casting is a
only
spoiler.
yeah exactly but I mean what did you think of him in this because I really enjoyed him I think more than Bridges but that could also be with the characters that they're playing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I paid a whole lot of attention to him, to be honest, just in watching it
I
because he
don't think
doesn't
the
figure too
script
much
did
into it.
either. Yeah, I don't think the
So,
script paid too much attention to him.
yeah, he's again like he's having fun with it. I think he kind of knows what the material is, for
Yeah.
better and for worse. But yeah, I do actually kind of like their scene towards the end that they have. You know, when she's in his parlor
Yeah.
and they're kind of having like this nice little heart to heart almost, which is before all the crazy shit happens at the end. That conversation, I think, is like when he's telling her about how he's taken a lover and she just kind of breaks down after a certain point at the mess that her life has become. I
Hmm.
think like talking with someone who she still kind of loves on some level, I guess, is sort of implied, that can definitely provide a more honest emotional response, which is why I think that scene and that dynamic works a little better than her stuff with Jeff Bridges. Because,
Hmm.
like, the scene right before that is this big blow up fight. she's like dismayed that the papers are reporting on her being missing and all that, and is suspected of the crime. So she just kind of takes it out on him, and she's laughing and crying and screaming, and it's again a mess. But all that stuff feels very like played up and not entirely natural for Jane,
Yeah.
if I may say so. So that's why I think the more meaningful stuff obviously works better for her when she's not having to totally play things up.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a good point too, that like her and Julia in that scene, you do kind of feel like the shared history of those characters, and that's a credit to them as actors, because I don't think that the script really develops that much at all.
Right.
But I buy them in it, and I think too the her and Bridges stuff is so weird. What you were saying earlier about like you just really don't buy that she would even like, why would she be hanging out with this dude, let alone like interested in him? And the movie ends with them to like getting together. Like he asks her like what she wants to do now, and she like, when he asked her that, I was very interested in that, because I had no sense of like tracking her like interior journey throughout the movie. Like he asked her that, and I'm like, I feel like I should know what her answer is going to be, but like I
But it
don't
could
have
be
a
anything,
clue. Yeah,
knowing this
exactly.
movie.
But it seems like she mostly just wants to be with Jeff Bridges, and that she mentions that she hasn't had a drink in 2 days. And I'm like, is this what the movie's been about the whole time? Is like this journey for her to relinquish her alcoholism? But I think that she, strangely, and a huge credit to her, is that I think that she's actually pretty good in that ending scene. I think that there's
Yeah,
a lot
I
of
agree.
conviction in her performance, which is a huge, huge, huge praise for her, because the script does not earn what they're selling in that finale whatsoever.
Right. I totally agree. I think ultimately it's just a film that is not really worthy of her talents, but I
Yeah.
do again appreciate that she fully throws herself into it like the old pro that she is, and it does just make me long for her to have this kind of a juicy, dramatic part again all these years later, hopefully with a better script. I don't know if
Yeah.
she wants that at this point. She certainly doesn't have anything to prove, but it would be nice if we could see a little bit of this side of her again.
Yeah. Although
So
I'll take 80 for Brady too, honestly. I'll take it. I
yeah,
enjoyed that
I
movie.
I think I love those ensemble comedies and her hanging out with her contemporaries, Lily Tomlin and everything. But like, I want
Yeah.
to see a little bit of a more dramatic side because I think she still has it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's pretty much all I have on The Morning After. Not a film I would recommend from this lineup, but she's having fun with it.
Yeah,
So
I'll say this was, out of all of these, I had seen all the other movies before. This is my first time watching The Morning After, and I'm glad that I've seen it. Like, I feel like it's always kind of been lurking in the shadows of my watch list, because I know like its reputation, but I'm also like, I mean, Sidney Lumet directing, Jane Fonda, Jeff Bridges, and like a
yeah,
mystery thriller. Like, how could that not be great? And we got the answer as to how that could not be great. But I'm glad that I got it. I'm glad that I
yeah.
got the answer.
Also a pretty cool poster, I must say.
It
Like
is
if
a
I
cool
saw that poster, I'd
poster.
be like, I'd see that movie in
Yeah.
1986. Anyway, okay, let's move on to our next nominee, Sissy Spacek in Crimes of the Heart. So Sissy Spacek has now racked up 5 Oscar nominations. She's a winner at the start of the decade, and she's in this very impressive kind of pattern of getting a Best Actress nomination every 2 years since Coal Miner's Daughter in 1980. Then she has Missing in 82, The River in 84, and now Crimes of the Heart in 86. So obviously it'll be a little while until we get to her next nomination, which is for In the Bedroom, which I'm very excited to get to eventually. But this is the end of a really strong run for her with the Academy in the 80s. Also, I'd say, relatively speaking, this is lighter fare compared to all the other nominations leading up to this, plus Carrie in 76. So, Crimes of the Heart, it comes from a stage play, Pulitzer Prize winning stage play, and it's about the 3 McGrath sisters who live in Mississippi, and they each are dealing with different issues relating to their love lives. Diane Keaton plays Lenny, who's a very neurotic and resistant to love. Jessica Lange plays Meg, who's a singer who has a kind of tumultuous relationship with this local guy. And Sissy Spacek plays Babe, who has recently shot her husband for reasons that are eventually revealed. And they all kind of converge in their childhood home and sort of rehash the past and try to deal with the stuff in their present. So let's get right into it. Sissy Spacek, Crimes of the Heart. This is another odd movie for me personally, with a very dark comedic tone. But yeah, we got 3 iconic Best Actress winners coming together here, going toe to toe, sort of. So tell me your thoughts on Crimes of the Heart and this performance from Sissy.
Yeah, I think this is even maybe more than Children of a Lesser God. This is kind of what I think of when I think like the 80s Oscar period is a lot of very like movies that for me are kind of slogs to get through, and this kind of was. I saw this on probably like 15 years ago on Netflix Instant, when they actually had like on their streaming they had older movies, and I was excited to see it just because you see the poster and you see these 3 like titans on it, and like it's all 3 of them together. How could it be bad? And it's not bad, it's just kind of there, I think, for me. And like you want a lot more from it. It definitely feels like when people bemoan like adaptations of plays, I think Crimes of the Heart is the kind of movie, like it feels very stagey, it feels very like this intro scene, here we go, like it's the 2 of them talking. But like I struggled with the larger themes of like existing as a woman in this world, in this environment, in this setting. I don't feel like I really grasped too much of that. The stuff that did kind of come alive for me more is when it's them as sisters and them kind of like gossiping about each other. I think that there's like a kinship with them, and sort of that sisterly like bitterness and rivalry. Like Lang is the one who always got all the boys, Keaton's kind of the mess, and Spacek exists as like, there's like a fun irony in the fact that they're all reunited right now because she tried to kill her husband, and she's almost the voice of reason. She's almost sort of like disconnected from all of their like petty foibles. And I think that she's endearing in that respect. She's really laying on the accent thick here. She plays the sax kind of randomly, like periodically, for no real reason. But it's nice to watch Sissy Spacek playing the sax on the porch in the moonlight. But yeah, I struggled with this one a bit. I struggled keeping my interest going with this one, I think.
Yeah, same, which is troubling because this should be right up my alley, quite honestly.
Yeah.
This is, I feel like I was never really fully on the film's wavelength per se. I do kind of understand what it's going for, and it's sort of treating this darker subject matter with a light touch and sort of showing how sisterhood can sort of bond you through whatever comes your way in life. The Southern Gothic style, like I sort of get it, like the elements of it, but I just find the direction, once again, another film struggling with direction, to be very uninspired, honestly. It's very stage bound and, very fine house. It would be fun to hang out with those ladies, but there's something kind of artificial about it for me. I don't know if you agree with that, about, I don't know, the setup. It just feels extremely like you're watching a play.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that one of the notes that I wrote, that I kind of jotted down specifically with Spacek too, but I think it kind of applies to all of the characters, is like you really just feel like you are watching actors like rehearsing for a
feels
production.
Like an exercise.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like you're getting a sense of these as real people whatsoever. And I think the movie keeps like bucking against that. Like there's a scene where Lang and Spacek are like kind of speculating about Keaton's character's sex life, and I think that it's a very enjoyable scene, and you start to get that sort of like sisterhoodness with it, like the fact that they have this history together, and like you for a moment start to believe these are real human beings. But then it goes into this flashback of Spacek telling a story, and it's got like these like crazy like ooh like flashback music, and it just like becomes so much like the thing that you were talking about, where like in introing the movie, you were like, this is a comedy, like, and
Mhm.
it does feel like I don't know like what is the register that this movie is trying to put me into. And it also, like the morning after, it has a lot of really weird race stuff
Mhm.
that I'm just like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah. Don't really understand that. But even like some of the casting I don't fully love, like Diane Keaton, I don't think is fully able to play like a convincing southerner, you know.
Yeah.
Not my go-to southern actress, Diane Keaton. I mean, Jessica Lange is solid as always, but I do think sometimes pushes a little hard and doesn't really have a lot of layers. So for me, it's not a total surprise that Sissy was the one who was singled out from the three, because she,
Yeah.
to me, feels the most natural. She's obviously a Texas girl, so she's been in this kind of culture before. And I think she does give a level of almost like a dignity to her character that does feel genuine. Like she cares about the person she's playing. And she also gets a lot of good laugh lines in the film, I think, even though it's like her circumstances, like she's had this recent experience of shooting her husband, and we get the revelation that she was having an affair with a teenager, and there's some like natural drama to that, but she has this kind of sincerity in the way that she expresses herself, I think, in especially in the lighter scenes, that you kind of can't help but to like her and almost want to
Hmm.
protect her, even though what she's been accused of is like pretty wild, to put it
Yeah.
mildly.
Yeah, it's when she's telling Lang about the affair, it's so crazy because
Yeah.
like Lang like balks at her having an affair with a black boy, not with her having an affair with a 15-year-old, but
Yep.
yeah, like it's like a scene where like we are very taken aback, but at the same time, Spacek is playing it with such a like a carefree kind of quality to her
Yeah.
that is really endearing. And like even though she's saying like that she's had an affair with a child, essentially, like you're still just like, she seems like she would kind of be a hoot to hang out with.
Yeah. I'd drink with her,
Play the
you
sex
know.
with. Yeah, absolutely.
um, yeah, Maggie even says something about like, I didn't know you were so liberal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
And she's just
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
I'm not a liberal, I'm a democratic. Which is, again, like she sells those little one-liners really well. But
Yeah.
then like within the same kind of part of the film, we just get that flashback of her, wanting to end her life by
Yeah.
shooting herself after her husband comes around and is like shooing away the guy she's having an affair with. And
So weird.
the tone for a lot of the film is kind of satirical and heightened, but she also does get those moments once in a while that show a sincerity and an urgency, I think, in her eyes that you're able to connect with. I've talked a lot over the course of my Sissy Spacek coverage about her eyes, because they're just like so striking. And for me, that's kind of who I connect with easily, not just because I had to watch it for this and watch her performance the most, but like she to
Yeah.
me is like the window into the film, even though again her circumstances are kind of crazy to be, have her be the kind of surrogate for all the
Yeah.
craziness going on in the film.
Yeah. I love her voice too, and like kind of how she can utilize her voice in such different ways, because it is just with the accent, like it has like such a childlike quality to it, and she plays that up in something like Carrie or Badlands or Three Women.
Right.
But then like something like this, something like In the Bedroom, like she's like, you still have that register in her voice, but she can really turn it into something where it has like more of like this elegance to it, and then also kind of this like hardened woman kind of quality to
Yeah.
it. And like especially in obviously this, like she's the one who has been through this very abusive marriage, and tried to kill her husband, considered killing herself. And you just feel in the way that she carries herself and the way that she speaks that like this is a woman who's like been through some shit. And I
Yeah.
think that that's something that yeah speaks a lot to her qualities as an actor, that she's kind of able to like Fonda in The Morning After, like able to elevate a not great script with a director who doesn't really know how to handle the script, but she has moments where she really pops still.
Yeah. And I think she has been through some shit, but she also is so young still, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, obviously, it's been like 10 years since Carrie, so she is
Yeah.
older now, but she still reads to me as young and like the younger
Yeah.
sister here. And I think it's kind of like this superpower she has that she's able to just constantly give that like kid sister energy, I guess,
Yeah,
at
it's
least
such a
when they're together, you know?
it's such a jump from like this to in the bedroom. Obviously, there's like 15 years between them, but like
Yeah.
in the bedroom, like that's such like mom, like grandma kind of like
Yeah.
energy. And like it is, yeah, but still in this, you still have a sense of like, oh, a young woman who's kind of lost her innocence through the experience that we're seeing her and like the flashbacks and everything in this.
Right. Yeah. I do want to talk about the chemistry that she has with her sisters.
Yeah.
I do think that they do develop a pretty solid chemistry, and the way they're kind of always like needling each other and getting in each other's
Yeah.
business and being annoyed with each other. And you see, especially in scenes like when it's later at night and Meg is revealing that like Babe told her about Lenny getting involved with a boy at one time in the past, and it kind of
Yeah.
explodes into this argument because Lenny is obviously offended that Babe told Meg, and Babe is mad that Meg couldn't keep her mouth shut and all this stuff. And Meg is just like very blasé about the whole thing. But it feels like, they sort of settle into a dynamic that they maybe always had since they were kids,
Hmm.
with Lenny being like kind of the sensitive one, maybe, and Meg being that sort of popular, bolder one. And then with Babe kind of, in the middle, watching from the sidelines in a way, and maybe being a messenger and a mediator between the two. I do enjoy the scene where she's like shoveling popcorn in her mouth, just like watching
Hmm.
her sisters argue. Pretty sitcom-y kind of stuff there, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think that's the part where the movie really comes alive. Like those
Yeah.
scenes where they're allowed to just show the bond that they have and that they've, you do believe that shared history with them together, and it just makes you yearn for just want to see the three of them together in a different movie. Even now, I think that the three of them
Yeah.
would be so good together in something where they're allowed to just do that, to just, do that kind of a thing where they're like a Steel Magnolias or something like that.
Mhm.
Like that thing where it's really just more about the relationship that these women have with each other and less about these larger ideas that I don't think the movie really know and the script really knows what to do with the violence and the flashbacks and the affairs and
Yeah.
attempted murders and attempted suicides and all these
Yeah.
like very stagey kind of elements to it.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. It just feels more natural when it's just them kind of shooting the shit and just bouncing back and forth. So yeah, I do think she does pretty well in kind of the more broadly comedic scenes. Again, like almost slapsticky when like
Mm-hmm.
she finds out that her husband had photos of her and the guy she's having an affair with taken, and that he's probably going to use that against her in their case, and she's kind of panicking. And then Lenny is like calling out for her from, the second floor, and because she's like hearing all this commotion, and Babe has to like hide the photos somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like very sitcom energy, but she's just very watchable in that mode. I don't think we get a lot of opportunity up to that point for her in Sissy's career for her to do that type of comedy, but like she really excels in that like zany madcap energy for me.
Yeah, she's great in Hot Rod, the Andy Samberg movie,
Yeah,
where like that's her playing
fair
that
enough.
kind of register. And like I
Yeah,
was thinking while you were talking, I was like, how many like straight up comedies has Sissy Spacek done? And it's not a ton,
yeah.
but it's more than I would think initially when I think
Hmm.
about Sissy Spacek and like the kind of roles that I remember her for.
Yeah,
She should do more.
I agree. So yeah, I also enjoy when they are telling Meg about how their grandfather had like a stroke, and they're just delirious that at a certain point they just burst out laughing. And it's like this
Yeah.
sort of release of all that tension that's been built up to that point. Again, moments like that are like I'd love to just like hang out with Sissy and just like
Yeah, that's a really good like moment where it like that is like a very like stagey kind of thing. Like it's a very
it
like
is.
play moment, but I think you actually buy it because it's rooted in their relationship and just kind of letting them like naturally exist. You can buy that like that is a moment that would just naturally kind of occur in a moment of grief for them like that.
Exactly. Right. But we do have to talk about, I think, her big dramatic, sort of also comedic moment too, which is when her lawyer comes up with this plan to like send Willie away, and it causes her to slip into a depression and causes her to try to kill herself again. And she has like this string of attempts to make it happen, that plays out again like weirdly comedically. Like first she
Yeah.
tries to hang herself, but like the chandelier falls, so we have this scene of her like trudging down the
Just
stairs with
dragging it
with the
behind her.
noose around her neck
Yeah.
and the chandeliers. Yeah, which is like darkly funny. And then she tries to stab herself, but she can't really work up the courage. Then she puts her head in the oven, but she can't light the match. But then, like, she knocks herself out accidentally by hitting her head. And, like, she's playing it out with this kind of frustration of being like, God, I can't even get this to go my way. And, you know, of course, she's eventually discovered and everything's okay. But curious your thoughts about that scene.
Oh, I kind of struggled. Like that to me was one where I'm like, this feels like a play. Like this definitely feels like something like I could see, on the stage. And it just is one where like as opposed to the scene with them kind of like cracking up spontaneously together, like it just felt very put on in a way where like I didn't buy this character kind of doing this and going through the steps, and even the slapsticky, like it felt more constructed than the slapsticky elements with Spacek that worked for me in it. But
Yeah.
how did it play out for you? Did you give into it, or?
The only reason I enjoy it is because of what she brought to it, which again is that feeling of like, I'm at my wit's end and yet I still can't
Mm-hmm.
even do this right. And she just plays up the kind of drama and the comedy of it really well. That's why I think it's a good scene for her, even if like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm generally okay with like joking about darker things, but like the tone of this is just not very,
Yeah,
not
it's
it
so
for me.
yeah, because it's not going as far into like Harold and Maude or like Better Off Dead
Right.
territory where like you understand what they're going for more with that. Whereas this, it's like they're trying to kind of play too many angles and they end up settling in a place where it doesn't really feel like they're playing any angle. And so you just don't have a sense of what the tone's supposed to be.
Yeah. And then, it kind of just ends
Yeah.
without too much resolution beyond them just like, hey, we're bonding as sisters again. And that's nice. And I feel
Yeah.
like I'm sort of missing like an entire second half to like
Yeah.
kick it into a different gear, and it just doesn't come.
Yeah, I remembered, or I didn't, like I had seen it so many years ago and I did not remember like a single thing about this movie. And through the process of watching it, I kind of, especially with how it ends and everything, I'm like, oh, I understand like why this didn't really even register like much in my memory.
Yeah.
Because it just kind of, yeah, just fizzles out in a way where it doesn't even leave you with a sense of like, what have we all been through here?
Right. But Sissy Spacek, I'd say, is best in show. Again, I understand why she got the nomination of the three. Um,
Certainly, yeah, of the three.
But yeah, this is another one where, like, I hate to say it because I really do love Sissy Spacek, but like this and sort of Missing a little bit and The River have just not really been up to standard for me in a way that they're like calling to be nominated necessarily. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just waiting for that In the Bedroom nomination.
Yeah, she's gonna
So
come back strong.
yes, yes. All right, shall we move on to our next nominee? Hopefully, this will be a little more fun.
Yeah.
Okay, Kathleen Turner in Peggy Sue Got Married. So, this is a one and done, sadly, for Kathleen Turner, again, unless she comes back with something all these years later, which would be incredible. But she really owned the 80s, and we've been talking on this show actually about the performances that she's been snubbed for leading up to this, like Body Heat, Romancing the Stone, Prizzi's Honor, all performances that she was definitely on the radar for. And in the case of, Romancing the Stone and Prizzi's Honor, she wins the Golden Globe 2 years in a row, but still isn't even nominated at the
Yeah.
Oscars. And then here we have Peggy Sue Got Married, which she gets her one and only Oscar nomination for. But just to back up a little bit, because we're introducing Kathleen Turner here, she was born in Missouri and in a conservative household, and she didn't really have the approval from her parents to go into acting, but she went for it anyway, and it was obviously a great decision. She did stage work and she did a soap opera before she made her film debut in Body Heat, which really rose her to prominence, and she was sort of lauded for her screen presence and her raspy voice, and she was even compared to Lauren Bacall in that respect. And she starred in some lighter roles after that, relatively, including what I've already mentioned, Romancing the Stone, Prince's Honor, Jewel of the Nile. She's in another erotic thriller, Crimes of Passion. So wasn't necessarily doing a lot of like big heavyweight traditional drama necessarily, which may explain why she wasn't fully taken seriously, at least by the Academy standards. But Peggy Sue Got Married. She's working with Francis Ford Coppola. Originally, the role was set for Deborah Winger, but she dropped out, so Kathleen took the part. And it tells the story of Peggy Sue, played by Kathleen, and she's not happy with her life. She's separated from her high school sweetheart, Charlie, played by Nicolas Cage in a truly unhinged performance. And she goes to her high school reunion where she ends up fainting and waking up in 1960, still with the knowledge of being an adult now, and she gets to live her high school days all over again and figure out where things kind of went wrong for her and maybe do some things differently. So yeah, this is a fun one we can talk about here. Very curious to hear your thoughts on the great Kathleen Turner and her performance here.
Yeah, Kathleen Turner is somebody who like we were talking about Joe Clayburgh, and Kathleen Turner is somebody who like dominated this decade, and then just kind of like Hollywood was just like over her after it for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
I mean I love Kathleen Turner. The Body Heat, like I feel like plenty of people, you know, recognize Body Heat as like one of the craziest snubs ever that she didn't get nominated for that. But like I love her in Romancing the Stone. I love her in Crimes of Passion. But like this is a very different role than I typically associate with her. She brings such like a sincerity to it. Kind of what you were talking about with Jane Fonda, where like she like this is a kind of movie that could be played as a lark, but her and Francis Ford Coppola are bringing so much like authenticity and like dimensionality and believability to what this woman's going through. And I think this is a really almost impossible kind of role to pull off, this person out of time, but she's really convincing as somebody who's being brought back to her teenage years and her teenage world, while also carrying the baggage of the many years that she's lived after that back into it. In the opening scenes where she's at like her reunion as her present day self, there's a real vulnerability to her that I don't think up until this point we were used to seeing Turner play. There's like a panic to her when she sees her ex-husband. All right, they're not like divorced yet, right? They're separated still.
Yeah.
Yeah. When she sees Cage's character come into the room, and there's just something really palpable about like her energy and her emotionality in this, where you can really feel everything that she's going through in every moment. And I think in the early sections of the movie when she goes back in time, it's a great kind of balance of the like intensity of emotions that you feel when you're a teenager, with still having that sort of perspective of going back there. And I think there's just so many great little moments where you see her like embracing these elements of being brought back to your childhood when she's first in school and she's like doing the national anthem or Pledge of Allegiance or whatever, and like she's so excited. Nobody's ever had so much enthusiasm, and like that's such a funny beat, but it's also played really sincere for her. Like she's
Yeah.
not, it's not like a satire, she's not, you know, playing it for big laughs or anything. But then you also just get her developing these relationships with people that she probably didn't look twice at when she was in high school. And she understands now that you're later in life, what the benefit is of kind of reaching outside of your comfort zone, reaching outside of your circle, and learning more about the world through different people. And yeah, I really, there's so many aspects of this movie that I really love, but I think her performance centers it all brilliantly. And without her at the center, like it could have easily like fallen apart, especially when you've got Cage doing this gonzo nonsense of a performance that I also really enjoy,
Yeah.
but needs Kathleen Turner there to kind of rein us back in and keep us grounded.
Yes, I love this. I, believe it or not, people haven't actually seen Peggy Sue Got Married before this. This was one of those blind spots for me. Obviously, in this time period, a lot of boomer nostalgia and also time travel. Like, this is the year after Back to the Future, and this is like a more mature, sort of dramatic version of Back to the Future. Maybe not fully dramatic, but it's like more about the emotional journey of this woman and how she's feeling through all this rather than feeling like this is like a wacky adventure, you know? And so I think she is perfect here. I find her to be so charming, so lived in. You immediately sympathize with her feelings of disappointment. We see her, like, you know, in the mirror in the opening scene applying lipstick and really just sort of fretting over what other
Hmm.
people might think of how she's, you know, separated from Charlie, who happens to be very well known in town. And there's a lot of like business that she's doing, like really playing with her hands and being
Hmm.
uncomfortable in her own skin. She's kind of gawky, you know, and she has that husky voice. So she feels kind of displaced a little bit from like the prom queen type that maybe she
Hmm.
was. But then as she's reuniting with her classmates, you see this beautiful sort of effervescent personality from her and sort of laughing with her old friends, and her charisma I think just makes it so easy for you to root for her even before all of the high concept stuff happens.
Yeah, yeah, that's really well said. I think that you do like it takes a special something to immediately kind of invest you in a character like this and feel for her and kind of root for her. Like even when she kind of faints, you know, or before that, like she gets anointed as like the reunion queen and like you kind of see the path separate for her to get up there and you just like you love that for her. You're like scared of it for her because she clearly doesn't really want like a ton of attention. She probably doesn't
Right.
want to be like up in front of everybody, but you also want her to get that kind of affection and recognition. And like that's within the first 10 minutes of the movie you're already so invested in this character, and so it makes it so much easier to go back through this journey with her. But I really love what you were saying about it being so much more about the emotional journey of her rather than the high concept hijinks of it. And
Right.
I think that's the biggest selling point where like and it's a huge credit to I think Coppola's approach to this too, where the 80s for Francis Ford Coppola is such a fascinating decade for him. Like I love like everybody else, I love his like 70s, you know, quartet of masterpieces, but I almost prefer his 80s run of Rumblefish and The Outsiders and One from the Heart and Cotton Club, where he's like taking these really big swings. For a lot of people, they didn't work at the time, but so you know some people have kind of come around on him. I love like everything that he did in the 80s, but this really stands out as like one that just on paper you wouldn't think of Francis Ford Coppola for this, and it could have gone the way of Jack, you know, in the 90s and been
Sure.
very awful.
Hmm.
But yeah, I referenced Frank Capra in the beginning of this episode when talking about this movie, and I think that it really does feel like it has that sense of like there's a magic to it, there's like a surrealism to it, but you're always like within the character's perspective well enough that it all feels so real. You never even question of like is this really happening? You're just like the emotional truth of it is there the whole way through, and Turner really is like that through line for it. There's late in the movie, there's a confrontation scene with her and Cage's character where she says, it's like I've got a window in my heart you can just come through anytime you like. I've got to close it or nothing will ever change. And she's having this conversation with the high school version of him who hasn't experienced all of this with her. But in one line and in one scene, you get this sense of like 30 years of marriage that she's been living with and kind of like the resentment and bitterness that built up to it, but also like the sheer emotion and love that she also like holds with this person, those kind of conflicting identities. And yeah, it's just it's so impressive the way that she's able to keep us within what her experience of the world has been, even though we are like only in these teenage years. We're mostly in the movie experiencing just that world, but you never lose sense of the fact that this is a woman who's lived a whole life outside of, you know, the 16, 17, 18 like years that her character is kind of pushed back into.
Yes. And speaking to that, actually, she has this really fascinating quote, Kathleen Turner, about her performance and her character. And this is from her sort of looking back on this performance. This was not like contemporary, but she said, how could anyone go back to being 16 and not slip back into the true behavior that they had at that time? It would be impossible not to, because not to would mean that you'd have to be thinking about it every second. It would be a level of cognitive awareness that no one's capable of. She's literally back in her 16-year-old body, in her 16-year-old life. So she is true to the life of a 16-year-old. What's lovely about the role is that as the film goes on, you can see what being 16 again does to her 42-year-old self. Her adult person almost slips away a little. She's renewed, which is a very, heady concept, but I think that does bear out in her performance and how seamlessly she just kind of reverts to that younger version of herself, at least physically and everything, like her kind of like flopping around and having more energy and seeming more alert and active and everything, and then blending that with those hints of the older, wiser version of herself, and like knowing where this is all going but still being present as a 16-year-old. Like, how did she manage this performance, I guess, is my question. Because there's no precedent for this.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's such a unique kind of performance, character, film. Like the approach of it is so unique. She goes back and like there's the moment where after she's like gone to sleep, she's woken up the next day, she's still in her body. Like we see her get down to dinner or to breakfast and she's just like, guess I'm going to school. Like I guess I'm just living, this is just what I'm doing now. And like that's such a great moment where I think in a lot of movies you would see the character kind of going through a whole week of like, how do I get out of here? But for her, she's almost immediately like just kind of going with the flow, and it helps allow us as the audience to go with the flow and just buy that, like, okay, this is what the movie's selling me and this is what the performance is selling me. And I read too that there's a scene early on when she goes back in time where she gets a call and like it's from her grandmother who has passed away in the present day by that point, and she really breaks down, and like you feel that like all of my grandparents have passed away at this point. My last remaining grandfather passed away like 2 months ago, so like that's still pretty fresh for me. And when she's going through that emotion, like I really connected with it and like could very easily put myself in that position. And then later on there's a scene where she goes to see her grandparents, and it's like such like a, even with all of the the nostalgia, the kind of boomer nostalgia stuff that you're talking about, like all of the, they don't fully go into the high concept stuff, but there is some like high concept, just like environmental stuff going on here. And then she goes to see her grandparents, and it's like the most like touching, like tender sequence of the movie. And her grandma tells her to choose the things you'll be proud of, the things that'll last. And like you just see her take that in, and like that's kind of the emotional push for her to be ready to go back to what her life is like in the present day with these kind of lessons that she's learned. And it's not, I think the one of the crucial things for me with Turner's performance is that she's not overplaying it at all. Like she could really lean into some of those more tropey elements of this, but yeah, she's just so sincere, and you really see her taking in everything, and it really just helps you feel those swells of emotions when she's feeling them, to feel that journey, to feel her really, the thing that I was talking about with The Morning After and Jane Fonda's performance, where at the end of it she gets asked what does she want, and I'm like, I couldn't even really track what the interior journey of this character was throughout this whole movie. Whereas in Peggy Sue Got Married, I'm with her every single step of the way. Like I fully understand what's going on with her at every moment, and that's such like a testament to her performance.
Yes, I totally agree. And especially on the thread of her grandparents. I've also lost my grandparents. So watching this, and having her grandmother call her and just hearing her voice.
Yeah.
It's again like this really simple kind of understated scene, but you can see her just go white,
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like obviously in the present, her grandmother's died, and she has this kind of sweet conversation with her mother after that about how, grandma's fine. And it could sort of verge into maybe some corniness, maybe, but you could see the wisdom in her eyes that just makes it feel so bittersweet. and like she's trying to like reckon with this new reality and sort of try to appreciate it for what it is, and like you said, sort of go with it rather than be totally rattled by it and just want to escape as much as possible. So yeah, that is why I think you kind of want to just hang with her, and just see what she's gonna get into.
Yeah, I read too that she was like so invested in the role that she apparently was having or Kathleen Turner in her real life was having nightmares of her dead grandmother calling her on the phone,
Oh God.
which is just yeah, that's just like a whole other level of method acting where
Yeah, I guess
you're
so.
dreaming the experiences of the character.
Yeah, I'm just picturing that on like the press tour of her talking about like
Yeah.
she was communing with her dead grandparents.
The
Yeah,
Lady Gaga Gucci
exactly.
spoke to me.
Yes, exactly. I also want to talk about this sort of fling that she has with this sort of artsy loner that she always wanted
Hmm.
to get with in high school, which is like this classic sort of fantasy. But she obviously has this worldliness to her at the same time when she's talking to him and he's like dissing his parents, and she's basically like, hey, don't go too hard on your parents, they're doing their best. And a lot of it again could be kind of goofy dumb sex comedy, even kind of
Hmm.
hijinks, but they actually have this really nice bond, and she's kind of like touched by how he seems to know exactly what he wants. And they have sex, which is pretty chaste. It's not like some steamy thing compared to what other movies in this era might do, but it has a really nice kind of innocence of like a first love getting intimate type of experience.
Mm.
I don't know, like again, scenes like that could just fall flat on its face in the hands of someone else, in another actress's hands, in another director's hands, but it just is like oddly touching.
Yeah, you talk about like tonal balances that really work, and that's such a great
Right.
scene where they have this gorgeous backdrop of like stars and they're in this like field, and like it's so romantic, and then he starts reciting this very like emphatic, like very corny poem to her that's like his original poem, and he's very much like he's aesthetically designed as like a Jack Kerouac or like Allen Ginsberg kind of type, like a
Yeah.
guy who takes himself very seriously. And he reads this super corny poem to her, and she retches at it, and it's like this really fun, like childlike kind of moment where it's like, oh, we're not taking this too seriously, but we're
Right.
taking it like just seriously enough. It's like complete inverse of Crimes of the Heart, where like you don't get the sense of tone there at all, but here, even with it's like this outlandish premise and all these different avenues that it goes down, like the tone just feels pitched exactly right the whole way.
Yeah. And I think even in scenes that could get out of hand and a little heightened, like that scene in the basement with Charlie,
Yeah.
when she's arguing with him about the future and how like she wants to save him from like years of disappointment and all this stuff and waiting for his big break. There's just an urgency and like a hurt almost in her voice, because on some level she's obviously talking about herself and her own
Hmm.
dreams that are unfulfilled. And it's like, for me, she kind of has almost like a Herculean task of making a lot of this feel so genuine when she is also falling back in love with Charlie, despite all the completely nutso choices that Nick Cage is making. And again, like you're saying, the stuff with the grandparents visiting them, and she's telling them about like what's going on with her and how she's from the future, and they believe her, and she's taken
Yeah.
to this lodge where they perform this ceremony. Like there's so much nonsense that she's having to sort of react to, and then being like kidnapped by Charlie, who was scared that they were going to vaporize her. But like she just has such a wise sensibility for her age that she just makes, for me, just like the perfect audience surrogate, that you just like are totally in her shoes.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you bring up too her like her falling back in love with Charlie through it, where
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that that's navigated, it has such like a maturity to it where there's not, even when she comes back to the present day after kind of going through this experience in the past and like reconnecting with like what she loves about him, it's not like she doesn't immediately like forgive him and forget everything and redeclare her love. She says that she needs time, but that he can come over for dinner and they can try and like work on reconciling. And I feel like that is so realistic to me that like she goes through this whole journey, but it doesn't fix everything in her present day life. It just kind of recontextualizes things for her, and it kind
Right.
of connects her again with the things that maybe she had lost sight of in the present, because there's a lot of hurt there. But because there is a lot of hurt there, she comes back and she's like, I want to work on this, like I'm willing to give you a chance, and like we can try and make it happen, but like it's not this like super like immediate like rosy happy ending, everything's solved. And I love that about it.
Yes, I totally agree. And I have seen some criticism from people about this ending and feeling like it is a little too, tied up in a bow and just like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, we're all just back to happy, happy ending here. But yeah, I think it is more complicated, and she gives it that like twinge of a little bit of a melancholy. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think she just knocked it out of the park. So I am a huge, huge fan of this performance. I'm so glad that the Oscars nominated this, because this could easily be another one that slipped through the cracks.
Yeah. I've never read, and just doing kind of research preparing for this, I never read her memoir, but I read a bunch of like excerpts from her memoir, and a
Hmm.
lot of like she apparently like hated working with Nicolas Cage on this, like hated what he
Yes.
was doing in this performance. And I mean, credit to her and her professionalism that like she talks about like just how much she hated the voice, she hated the dentures, like she just like she even voiced to Coppola like, are you cool? Like, what do you like? Do you see this shit? Like, are you okay with this? And like, she was like, he's the director, like he's happy with it. Like, I'm gonna do my job. And I think
Yeah.
that speaks a lot to her professionalism. I had no idea that Nicolas Cage apparently has sued her for like successfully has sued her for libel, because she like claimed that he was arrested for drunk driving and stealing a dog.
Yep.
But yeah, that was fun going, just kind of researching and going through their backstory.
Yeah. Again, like I said, the Herculean task of making it seem like she's falling in love with this guy who she cannot stand to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Wish we could be talking about more Kathleen performances, but maybe
Yeah,
someday.
it's a shame this is the only one for you for on this, but
Yeah.
oh well.
All right. Let's get to our final losing nominee, probably the one that we've all been waiting for. Okay, Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. I just feel like it bears repeating. Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, an Oscar nominated performance. What an incredible thing to have happened. So outside the box of what the Academy usually favors, and we wouldn't really get anything like this again in Best Actress until, I guess, sort of Sandra Bullock in Gravity, maybe. Fun fact though, I did go to Letterboxd and I looked at the full list of every Best Actress nominee in every film, and I did a search just for action.
Mm.
And there were only two movies that came up, which is
Wow.
Aliens and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh
I think I would definitely put
wow.
Gravity in that too, but
I
like,
feel like, yeah, I was expecting it to be I feel like Gravity is more of an action movie than Everything
yeah,
Everywhere, but I mean, I guess Everything Everywhere is kind of everything. But yeah, I
right.
was
Yeah, but either way, like I said,
two,
yeah,
or I mean
two,
two or three if you want to, give Gravity
right,
the bone. Like
out of 500.
out of every nominated
Yeah, yeah.
performance.
So we have to introduce Sigourney here as a new presence in this
Yeah,
category.
first one.
Yes, she was born in New York City, and her father was Pat Weaver Jr., who was at one time the president of NBC. Nepo baby, who's to say? Also created the Today Show, so pretty influential, I guess. But Sigourney, she was born Susan Weaver, but she changed her name to Sigourney at the age of 14 after a character in The Great Gatsby. And she eventually did a lot of theater work before she made her film debut in Annie Hall. And she barely really makes a mark in that, so I don't really know if I would fully count that as like a full debut necessarily. But either
Yeah.
way, after that she really did break through with Alien in 1979, where she played Ellen Ripley, who ends up being the sole survivor of her ship. And she continues in the world of sci-fi after that with Ghostbusters in 1984. She's also doing things like The Year of Living Dangerously, which is a little more prestige-y. And then she signs on to reprise her role in Aliens as Ripley. And one of my absolute favorite show business stories is James Cameron's pitch for Aliens, which is him writing the word alien on a whiteboard and then putting a $sign at the end, which is how it came to be known as Aliens. You know,
Aliens.
no one's doing it like Jim. So, but there was not a lot of confidence that like an Alien sequel would be a hit, mostly because horror was kind of declining. James Cameron was still pretty inexperienced at that time, you know, all this stuff. But then after The Terminator was a success, he made it happen. He pitched it as a roller coaster rather than a haunted house like the first one was. And the rest is history. So Aliens follows Ripley as she's woken up from being in stasis for 57 years after the events of the first Alien, and she enlists with a group of soldiers on a mission to investigate this exomoon that they've lost contact with from the colonists who are there. Come to find out, it's inhabited by a whole parasitic alien species who have pretty much wiped out the colonists, except for this one little girl, Newt, who Ripley takes under her wing and serves as her protector while they are fighting off the aliens all around them and trying to escape in one piece, I should say. So let's talk the big one here. Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. Much has been said about this performance outside of the context even of the Oscars, which is rare in this category. But wherever you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is definitely one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this year for it, is because I mean, this is, like you said, you know, two action movies come up, and like it just feels like such, even thinking about kind of blockbuster stuff that gets nominated in like supporting categories these days, or like Joaquin and Joker or whatever, like her getting nominated for this still just feels like such like a comet that you've never seen again. And like it's just not the kind of, not only not the kind of movie that you see get nominated, but also I just think not the kind of performance that you see get nominated, where like it's really a centering kind of performance. She doesn't have the big dramatic, you know, monologues. She really is just kind of this grounded force throughout it. She's taking us through the action, you know, spectacle of it. And it's through that performance and through Cameron's emphasis on this being a very like female focused movie, that he wanted Weaver back. He waited for years to make sure that, you know, this was going to be a movie about Ripley, and that it would kind of fly in the face of the Terminator and the Stallone kind of action, the very machismo driven like action films that were taking up the marketplace. And like he wanted Ripley back in the saddle here, and it being so much like as much a movie about motherhood and about surviving trauma and, you know, recovering from trauma as it is about aliens that, you know, get shot to hell, and, you know, space marines who get ripped to shreds. And I think that like immediately you get that sense that this is a character story, because when they discover her, you can see her living with the PTSD from the first, you know, from what she experienced in the first film, that she's dealing with the psychological ramifications of what she went through. And she's not this like cool as ice, like badass warrior who's like, oh, I killed an alien. Like I killed this thing none of you have ever even seen before. Like she really, the fear of her is palpable. Like when, like she has a desperation when talking to these like corporate wigs about like, we can't get involved with any of this shit. Like you gotta just like, if you think there's anything there, there should not be anybody there. Like if you think there's anything there, just like blast it to hell. Nobody should ever go back to that planet again. Like, and of course everybody, one of the great things about the Alien franchise is how much it's a critique of capitalism, and for them it's all just about, you know, let's get on this colony, let's, you know, terraform this planet, let's make as much money as we can. And Weaver through it all like has this real visceral quality to her, where she conveys the terror and the pain of watching what's going through. There's the scene where the aliens go into like the lair, and they're kind of, not the aliens, the Marines go into the alien lair, and they end up getting torn to shreds. And in that scene, Ripley is just watching it on a monitor, And just watching them on a monitor, you
Hmm.
feel like she's experiencing it all herself happen. And like that's something that she's such a great actor with her face. Like her expressions throughout her career, she tells so much through her eyes and through like her facial language. And that's exactly it in that scene. Like you get every sense of what the pain, the flashbacks to her own trauma, the fear of what's going to happen next. Are these aliens now going to come for her? Are they going to come for this girl that she's found, that she's invested so much of herself into protecting, this one child, this, one innocent life who doesn't deserve any of this stuff going through? And yeah, I mean, I think it's a great movie in general, but Weaver's performance, seeing her performance evolve from what it was in the first movie to this, it's like, yeah, next level.
Totally agree on all points. I think this is a very special nomination. And I love Sigourney Weaver. I think she has such a powerful screen presence and just this fierceness that she plays with such great effect.
Mm.
She is someone who is very much her own person and not really comparable to others in a way that I love to see in actresses, especially. She can be commanding and intimidating, but she can also be very caring and playful and sort of wry in her comedic timing. And I think she uses all of those skills in Aliens, which is, yeah, this like all time science fiction performance. She's pretty much the gold standard here. And just being this badass action hero who also has humanity to her, I think that is so important, and why she resonates with so many people is that like she's super cool and she's also the smartest one in the room, but she also has a heart. She cares very deeply about people and protecting people. And I just feel like with a role like this, when she's fighting off aliens for most of the film, I think it would be easy as an actor to just like, not think too hard about creating a super distinct character, but she is able to convey so many layers, and you can see how invested she is in this mission, and is also dealing with all the trauma of what she's already been through in the first movie. And it's just like her empathy when she sees other people dealing with it, like you said, in the present, and then seeing that nurturing side with Newt. And like, for as much as this movie is that fun roller coaster ride that James Cameron wanted it to be, I don't think it would be anywhere near as successful as it is if it weren't for Sigourney and just the tenacity that she brings to it, and how she takes it pretty seriously. Because, there's a lot of what could be corny sci-fi James Cameron dialogue here that she makes feel grounded in reality.
Yeah, I think everything about her feels so real. Like she totally just grounded is a really good word for it. Like with all the action and effects and action and suspense and special effects that are going on, like you could easily lose sight of the humanity. And there's so many of these kind of movies that we all watch where you totally lose sense of character in there, and you're just like, whether you enjoy them or not, like you're just watching the stuff blow up and like that the action going on. But yeah, like there's so many scenes, these little moments, like where Ripley's looking for Newt, and she finds Newt's tracker, and so she finds the tracker and thinks that she's dead. Like obviously, they've just abducted her, and with like just in this little moment, she flashes to like the entire world has kind of left her and she's devastated, and then she gets the sign that she's still alive, and Ripley immediately kind of switches back, like turns the gear, like turns off the panic and sets right back into like, okay, I need to be hard again. I need to be the badass again. I need to go save this kid again. And it's like having so many of those little moments where within a split second, she conveys like everything that this character is burying underneath the surface to try and get through this moment and to try and survive. And then she kind of lets it out. She lets us see it for a second, and then she dials it back in. Is so effective. And I like what you said too about like there's a little bit of like a sass to her sometimes. I wrote the one line down where she says to Paul Reiser's character, who's like the main sort of corporate entity who is one of the biggest, I mean, the biggest monster of them all. And
Hmm.
she says to him, I don't know what species is worse. I mean, you don't see them killing each other for a percentage. And it's like, that's a kind of line where like you could say it, like you see that in a Marvel movie and it just feels like such like a wink line,
Yeah.
but she has such conviction when she delivers it, so like it just hits hard, and like you can feel the sting of her saying that while also understanding like the wit, and like it is like a funny kind of line, and so like you get the laugh out of it, but you also get the sincerity and the conviction in her like really putting the punch on it, and it feels like that's her hitting him as hard as she hit him with a fist.
Yeah, she has quite a few good lines like that. I do think another one is when in the beginning when they're at that like meeting debriefing or whatever, and she just
Mm-hmm.
has no room for niceties at this point after everything she's been through, and she's told that like there's no sign of the creature that she described, and she's like, good, that's because I blew it out of the goddamn airlock.
Yeah.
Just like the power in her voice, and it's just it's badass, and her like continuing to emphasize the danger that's out there, when she's like insisting to Burke that she's not going back at first. There's a bit of a tremble in her voice that is showing
Yeah.
how traumatized she is still by her experiences, but there's also still that determination and a fight in her, which is what makes her decision to actually go out there and help them with the intent of just like obliterating them feel, I think, earned. I'm curious what you think of just that decision on her part to be like, I don't really want any part of this, but also, okay, I'll go and help you.
Yeah, I think that it's a kind of thing where like every time I watch this again at the beginning when I see how palpable that fear and panic is for her, I like I start to have this hesitation of like, oh, why would she like if she's feeling this afraid, like this
Right.
traumatized, why would she go back? But then
Yeah.
I think yeah, I fully agree with you that by the time it comes back around, you see that it's when she understands that there's whole families there. It's not just a bunch of Marines. It's not just, a bunch of people who have all the equipment they need to try and handle themselves. It is families, it's children there. And like the humanity in her comes through. And I fully buy that she, especially as she's seeing this frustration, like she's feeling more and more frustrated that like she knows what's there. Like she knows what she's experienced. None of these other people know what they're getting into. And so she, even though this is like some insurmountable mission that she never wants to be anywhere near one of these things again because she got out by the skin of her teeth, she still recognizes that she's like the best suited person to be there, and they kind of need her if there's any hope of any innocent people there being saved. And so I fully believe that she goes there, and that's kind of like what makes her such like a heroic figure, that she could be that afraid. It's such an inspirational figure too. Like she could be that afraid and still, have this feeling that this is the right thing to do. And she has
Right.
to kind of push through that fear. And we see her so many times throughout the movie, like when she's trying to rescue Newt and trying to help out the Marines, where like she's terrified. She wants nothing more than to not be in the situation at all, but she is going to do what it takes to put everything up against it and try to get as many people out of here as she can.
Yeah, I think it's that. And I think, as we've seen from Ripley by the end of Alien, she has such a grit and a stubborn
Mm-hmm.
edge, and also this kind of unresolved tension. Like she's still having nightmares that she kind of maybe sees this as a way of maybe resolving some of that tension. And you're seeing like the horrors of that playing out when she's speaking with the soldiers who are on this mission with her, talking about how these aliens managed to wipe out her crew in like 24 hours, and she's so frustrated with how these guys aren't really taking it seriously, or at least they aren't really interested in like the tactical part of truly understanding like the aliens and how they operate. And it's very testosterone heavy environment, so there's that underlying element too of her not really being taken seriously, but you're always on her side, even if she's being very stern and kind of like a killjoy, maybe. And it's because we've been along that ride with Ripley. We understand the
Yeah.
gravity of the situation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this too, like, she still has this really great arc. I think a thing that you buck up against a lot with like sequels is like we already understand who this character, especially with like a lead character, like who they're established to be, and there's not really too many more directions that you can go with them. But here, like Alien felt like our journey with Ripley as like a survivor, and Aliens feels like our journey with Ripley like as a fighter. And we see
Yeah.
kind of how like Hicks kind of gives her training on like weapons, and she's, you know, getting used to the machinery more, but she like very quickly adapts to it. There's never like a sense of like she's this, you know, she's lesser because she's like a woman or not a Marine or whatever. Like she is a fighter, she just needs the tools, and we kind of see her evolve into this absolute unstoppable badass by the end of it, like this absolute warrior. And we kind of take that journey into Alien 3, which I think obviously like is not as good of a movie as either the first two, but I think her performance is really fantastic in Alien 3. And like she just feels like she gets this character and is really invested in this character, and maybe not so much once you get to Alien Resurrection where she's like a clone of like Ripley and like all this other nonsense. But yeah, it just feels like her heart is really in the journey of Ripley, and like Ripley is as close to her as she wants her to be for the audience. And I think that that's, you feel that as an audience member when you can tell that an actor is so invested in their character.
Yeah, I think so. And even in the smaller moments of like when one of the soldiers is like grabbing her to kind of move her out of the way after they've
Mm-hmm.
discovered the sort of alien embryos and that are encased. And she has like this little flash of annoyance that like she's still dealing with this casual sexism for as small as something like that is. It's very like, you know, move out of the way, let the big boys take care of it, you know. And she's
Mm-hmm.
so good in those micro expressions and just her agitation with these men and their egos, but it's not directly commented on. It's not like didactic about anything like that, but you can definitely feel her wanting to just get past all this trivial sort of, you know, sexism bullshit, all that stuff, and just like be treated as an equal, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the fun things too about her dynamic with Lance Henriksen's character Bishop, the android,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing like the journey that they go through, where obviously after everything with Ian Holmes' character, the android in the first movie, and that he was sort of the villain to kind of, you know, turn against them, that she, when she first realizes that Bishop's an android, she is like in a state, like a total panic state, and is like, you got to get this guy out of here, we cannot trust, you know, these synthetic beings. And he's the one, along with Hicks, who treats her just completely as he treats anybody else. And it's because like
Yeah.
for an android there's no such thing as gender, and so like he can't have any of this like internalized misogyny or anything like that. And they go through this really great journey together too, and this sort of protectiveness that you see like her kind of develop this understanding of like, oh, I guess all the androids aren't bad. And maybe that's not a lesson that we need to learn right now as we're dealing with everything that we're dealing with right now. But
Right.
like, yeah, I love that journey. Like that's always one, like an arc, a relationship arc that I don't really think about like when I'm reflecting on the movie like years after having seen it, but every time I rewatch it, I'm really touched by that arc kind of playing out in the background amongst everything else going on. And like there's the scene where kind of towards the end where she's getting nude, they're trying to escape the queen, and they get to like the hangar, and she thinks that Bishop just abandoned them, like took the ship and left. And it's such like a gripping scene, because you can see, again, to her credit and like just what she does with her face, that you can see her kind of resignation, that like she's fought so hard through all of this, and this is kind of, this is it, this is the end. Like she's stranded, she's got no ammo, like the whole environment that they're around is coming apart, you know, around them. And the queen comes out of the lift, and Ripley just says to Newt, close your eyes, baby. And like it's such a tender moment of her just like in that final moment, what she thinks is her final moments, her thought is to have that kind of protectiveness and support over this child. And that speaks to what you were talking about earlier, that like as fierce and dominating as she is, she still has such like a tenderness and such a humanity and such a nurturing quality to her. And to capture all of that without a ton of dialogue, without a ton of big emotional scenes, is really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that relationship with Newt is such a obviously crucial part of this performance as she steps into being that maternal figure and is reassuring her that it's going to be okay, building a rapport with her. And it's not like she becomes super like sweet or like even
Yeah.
condescending to her at all. She still has that sort of blunt persona at times that we've come to know from Ripley, but it is revealing this other layer, this protector side, the softness and a patience that everyone else around her is obviously lacking. And I just admire how Sigourney is able to sort of still keep the inner strength of Ripley and her intelligence and be able to transition that so seamlessly onto her being this very loving maternal figure, without
Mhm.
it feeling too much like, oh, she's just going to be a mom now. And isn't that nice?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
this is Ripley's version of being that maternal figure,
Yeah,
if that
exactly.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly said. There's never a moment that feels like a betrayal of character. And I think
Right.
that it so easily could have been with pushing her into like, because too, like even on paper, like thinking about, oh, Ripley, the kind of like one of the OG final girls in the first Alien, the kind of subversion of, you think it's going to be the Tom Skerritt character who's like the lead and the guy who kind of, saves the day, and she's the survivor, she's the one who makes it out. To take that and then have Aliens be, she's a surrogate mom now, like on paper it feels kind of messed up, and like kind
Yeah.
of like that's what you think that women's roles are,
I
but
guess we're in the 80s now, so that's
yeah,
what we do.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it really subverts that by being
Yeah.
completely honest to the character and using that as a way to show her innate humanity and really effective and honest ways. And yeah, it's just so good.
Yeah, completely. And, towards the end, it's not like we have a whole lot of like psychological examination going on here by any means. It's all about like survival and trying to save each other. So it's very physical. It's very like endurance based kind of acting almost that's
Yeah.
required of her. But she just maintains such a believable, like a level of determination. None of her line readings are clunky, which very well could be, in another
Yeah.
actor's hands. I feel like none of her facial reactions are too over the top given the situation that she's in. And it's just like this single minded resolution, especially
Mm.
when it comes to saving Newt. Like you
Hmm.
feel like you're in good hands. And like keeping up that level of emotional investment and not ever making it feel cheesy, I think is way harder than it looks. Like when she like is stumbling upon the alien queen, right? And see her like making the calculations of how to proceed from there.
Yeah.
Just her face journey without saying anything, and then just like unleashing holy hell on all the eggs and everything. It's incredible stuff.
I love that you called out that scene, because I wrote down a little bit about that scene too when I was watching it, where it's such a like it's the perfect moment to highlight like what she's doing here, where without any words, like she, and
Yeah.
like you see her panic, and you see her panic that she has to stay quiet because she's trying not to disturb this nest that she's in, to disturb this queen, this like monstrous being so much more massive than she could have possibly imagined. And what you said was so great, that you can see in her face, in her eyes, that she is calculating what the right decisions are to make. And like it's a moment where for 30 seconds we're holding just on her face, and it's like the most compelling 30 seconds of the entire movie, because you are like watching her figure out what she's going to do, and we're thinking, what are you going to do? Like
Yeah.
how are
We're
you going
right
to
there
get
with
out of
you.
this? Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
so good. It's so good.
Yeah, and I think, just as valid as what Sissy Spacek or Jane Fonda are doing with their like monologues about the
Yeah.
past and getting to show all their emotional range and all that. Like Sigourney is tasked with something very different, but she just goes above and beyond, I think, to make you really care about her. And of course, we have the most iconic Sigourney Weaver moment, arguably of her entire career, when the alien queen once again is rearing its ugly head and she is about to go, she's about to get Newt, and Ripley gets into that cargo loader and she says the line, "Get away from her, you bitch." And just the emphasis that she puts on bitch
Yeah.
is like arguably the best use of that word in the English language.
Yeah.
Like that is like
Yeah.
hashtag Oscar cheer moment.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been the Flash entering the Speed Force in
That is it for me. Right?
1986. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I think when we were at the beginning of this episode, when you were asking me my favorite Oscar-winning Best Actress performance, I almost went with Julia Roberts and Erin Brockovich because like to me that is like the capital M capital S like movie star performance, like the kind of
Totally.
thing where only a movie star could deliver that kind of performance. And in Sigourney Weaver, in that moment of "Get Away from Her, You Bitch" and Aliens, like that to me, like if I met an alien and they asked me like, what is a movie star? I keep hearing this thing, movie star. Like, what does that mean? I would just show them the clip of that scene and be like, that's a movie star right there.
And then they would be terrified because of what she did to that alien.
Exactly. And they'd be out of here.
Yes. Yeah, I get chills every time that comes. I don't even know, like, how many times I've seen it. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Completely clinches the performance for me. The venom in her voice, the athleticism she shows after that with just like expelling it out of the airlock. You
Yeah.
know, it's such a powerful ending that's like pure four quadrant satisfaction for the audience, and to finally get that resolution that she's been looking for, being able to fully sleep again without fear,
Mm.
like it's such a winning ending.
Yeah. I think that's such a special thing about a moment like that in a movie where like I've probably seen this movie 5, 10 times and like I still get chills and like that moment's coming and it almost like you then at a certain point get this like really fun anticipation of knowing that it's
Yes.
coming and like it's like,
Totally.
oh my god, it's about to be here, it's about to be here, and then she says it and still you still just get the chills, like you can't
Hmm.
resist it. And yeah, I mean, what a moment, like what a statement for a performance to still have that effect even when you absolutely know that it's coming every time.
Yes, absolutely. This is incredible, incredible stuff. I think this should have been like, a trendsetter that would
Yeah.
lead to other action performances like this in sci-fi getting nominated. It bums me out that this was a outlier
Yeah.
ultimately, but I don't know. Maybe all these years later we could finally get to that place in a post everything everywhere world. Maybe we'll finally get one of these again.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I don't think it's happening this year, but maybe maybe
Probably not,
sometime soon.
but yeah. All right, let's get to our winner, Marlee Matlin in Children of a Lesser God. Marlee Matlin is our youngest Best Actress winner in Oscar history, 21 years old. She's actually the youngest of both lead acting categories still. So, Marlee Matlin, deaf actress, she lost her hearing when she was 18 months old, and she was interested in acting from an early age. She did children's theater starting at age 7, and she continued on with that for a while until she was actually discovered by Henry Winkler, national treasure Henry Winkler, and they became lifelong friends. Eventually, Marlee was in the stage production of Children of a Lesser God, but not as the character she plays here, not as the lead. And the director of this film adaptation, Randa Haynes, saw her on a videotape of the production and was really taken aback by her presence and compared her to Deborah Winger. Once again, Deborah Winger coming up again because it's the 80s.
Can't get away from
Um,
her, yeah, this
Yep.
decade.
So after a bit of a process, she got the part, and Marlee had never been in a film before, never been on TV before, so this was an entirely new experience for her. While she's filming, she also gets into a romance with her co-star William Hurt, and they have a very rocky relationship, which in some ways can maybe parallel what's going on in the film itself. We'll maybe talk about it, but she obviously proved herself to be this very natural on-screen presence, and she was hailed as one of the great screen debuts. So let's get into it. Children of a Lesser God. It's about this guy named James, played by William Hurt, who's a teacher at a school for the deaf and hard of hearing, and he gets into a relationship with the school janitor, Sarah, played by Marlee Matlin, who's closed off to the world, but she gradually opens up to him, and he tries to get her to speak, as he's trying to do with his students, but she's stubborn and won't do it, and we sort of track their up and down relationship from there. So, let's talk our winner, Marlee Matlin. Thoughts on Marlee and her Oscar-winning debut performance here?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one to dig into because I'll say I hate this movie. I hate this movie so much.
Mm-hmm.
But she is incredible in it. Like she is like the talk about Jane Fonda kind of lifting the morning after on her shoulders. Like Matlin, I feel like is keeping me alive getting through this movie. The
Yeah.
sort of like there's like a sudsy like 80s kind of Oscar bait movie to it, but more so just like the element of it being about this radical free thinker coming into this community, and like he's gonna, he has this like savior complex, and it's like it's rooting for him, and like the whole movie he is such a piece of shit and like so
Yep.
horrible to her. Like deep into the movie they're having intimate moments where he still is like demanding that she speak to him, and it's like, bro, what is wrong with you? And we're still supposed to like root for them in the end to get together, and like, and I'll say the biggest thing for me that is the issue with this movie is that instead of just putting subtitles on her dialogue, he understands sign language. Instead of just putting subtitles on her dialogue, they have William Hurt. Anytime she signs anything, William Hurt just repeats what she says out loud so that the audience can hear it. Like it feels so much like a movie made for like a hearing audience to like feel good about themselves. And I
Mm-hmm.
just hate that so much. But she is tremendous in it. Like it blows my mind that she's 21 in this. It blows my mind that or she was 19 when they filmed. She was 21 when she
Yeah.
won. And it blows my mind this is her debut performance on screen and film. And she just has such a like assuredness to her as a performer. She has such an immediate screen presence to her, and I think that she does such a great job of capturing the kind of chip on her shoulder that this character has, this kind of like hard ass sensibility who wants to intimidate everyone around her because she's afraid of getting hurt. And slowly we see those walls start to come down and her start to come out of her shell. And it's such a like it's this movie's loaded with these kind of cliches like that. Like the arc of the character is really cliched. Even the specific traits of the characters, like personality and like backstory and development, like she acts it out by being very sexually loose as a teenager, and like because she just wanted to show the world that she had value and stuff. And it just is very like eye rolling kind of cliches to me. But Matlin has such conviction in even delivering those kind of monologues where you believe this character, you believe her. And she also is really funny and really expressive and really charming. Like she has all these really poetic insights about the world. And like Matlin in her performance conveys them all so beautifully. And I just think it's such like a great example of a tremendous performance in a very bad movie that I think has aged extremely poorly. I get why, like, I 100%. I mean, I get why this would probably maybe get nominated for Oscars now. I mean, I have some similar issues with Coda and the perspective that movie is from, but yeah, it certainly looks even worse now to me than it did back then, especially just like the arc of their relationship and the fact that like he is such like a monstrous person to her, and somehow like it still is pitched as like a romance. But yeah, what are your feelings on the movie and Madeline in general?
Yeah, so I don't really love this movie either. Maybe I like it a little more than you because I know you did not care for this one bit
Yeah.
outside of her performance, but I could certainly see why an audience in 1986 would really respond to it. It's about relationships, it's aiming to be funny and dramatic. It's showing this culture that isn't often seen on the big screen.
Mhm.
So there's some novelty to a hearing audience. William Hurt is the incumbent Best Actor winner. Marlee Matlin is this fresh-faced discovery. Like, you can see the appeal, right?
Mhm.
But the way that the film presents itself, as you have beautifully outlined there, does leave a lot to be desired, especially that choice to not have any subtitles, for him to just parrot back everything she's saying. And it does feel like, for me, in the process of that, he actually starts to overwhelm her presence in the
Mhm.
film because he's, first of all, saying all his shit, like going off on these monologues at her, and then he's saying what she's communicating back to him. So it's just a lot of William Hurt, which can be good sometimes, not so good other times. This is a case where I think it's just too much. And also the way he insinuates himself into her life just feels a little icky at first. You know, there's a sense by the end that like she's now opened herself up to the world because of him, which I guess is a good thing. But there's a very ironic line around the middle of the film during one of their fights when she's saying how, you know, she doesn't want to be seen as an extension of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the film is kind of guilty of making her into that ultimately.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yes, none of that is the fault of Marlee's performance, which I think is really, really good. I think she has such a natural charm, and it's like the kind of like a untapped potential that she's tapping into that you see in like the best of debut performances like a Gabourey Sidibe or like a Sydney Flanagan recently, where
Yeah.
they don't seem to be in their own heads and super actorly, if you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying. It
Yeah.
feels fresh.
Yeah, it reminds me. I don't like. It wasn't her debut performance, but Renata Reinsva in "The Worst Person in the World." Like that's a
Yes.
recent, a rare kind of recent example where I can remember watching a movie and thinking like, this is a like quote Stars Born performance. Like this is I'm watching like one of our greats kind of being born in front of my eyes, and
Right.
it's a shame that obviously with the kind of roles that exist in Hollywood, like Marlee Matlin wasn't able to have more of a career of getting like really plum roles like on in film. Like she gets here. I mean, she's done good. Like I think that like I don't like Coda, but I think that she's really good in it. I think Troy Kotzer is really good in it too. Like I think that they're great. They have a great dynamic together. I was very surprised that, especially with it winning Best Picture, that she wasn't nominated for it. Like it seemed like a no brainer that she would have gotten a nomination
Yeah,
for
I
that.
was thinking about that too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just really bizarre. But yeah, I think that you really like nailed it with talking about how she just like kind of explodes on the screen. And
Yeah.
I think you also hit on one of my biggest gripes, which is the how much the her parroting her dialogue back to her, it feels like it's taking so much of the power away from her performance. And it's like
Yeah.
it's so exhausting. Like it's I remember I haven't watched this movie since I was a teenager before, you know, what rewatching it for this, and I didn't remember that element of it. And so like 10, 15 minutes in, I started thinking like, oh, is he just going to do this the whole movie? And then an hour and a half in, I was just so burned out by like their conversations because it's just so frustrating. And she's having these like really without subtitles there, you know, for a hearing person watching it, like she's having these really like emphatic like emotional monologues, and like you can see that she is clearly like going through so much. And it's you know a credit to her that without subtitles there, like before we even get her saying the things that she just said to him to us, like we still can see the emotion in what
Exactly.
she's delivering. But then yeah, it just feels like the movie is trying to rob the you know something of the power of her performance by then having her it's like whiny annoying like vocalizing of her words, and his just like this real he's got this like he's also got this kind of condescending quality to him
Oh
where like
yeah.
he clearly is like he thinks that she's you know beneath him in some kind of way. There's this weird also condescension about her working as a custodian and like
Mm.
kind of like a oh she's you know you're just so much better than that, like you can't think that's the lowest of the low, and you know you're hurting yourself, and like that's like a very like 80s kind of thing. And like I mean a very
Yeah.
like it probably would happen in a movie today too, but like it just there's like a pitying quality to a lot of this movie that just like doesn't sit right with me. But I get like Madeline just shines through all of that somehow. Like the scene, I want to talk a little bit about the scene. They're like first date, right? Where they go out to
Mm.
dinner and there's like the dancing scene. And it's again a kind of a cliche of the, you know, she's feeling the music and she just wants to dance. But it's beautiful. Like it's such a beautiful, like physically expressive moment from her, watching her kind of feel the music, her eyes close, and this gorgeous like expression of freedom in like the movement of her body. And we watch William Hurt watching her in that, and you can totally understand how he's falling in love with her in that moment. And you know, I mean, he doesn't express his love in ways that I agree with, and I'm very mad at him for that. But like you like fully get the sense of like this is a character who is like completely transfixing us, and like everybody's you know drawn to her, and it's such a great scene.
Yeah, she has such a lyrical kind of flow
Yeah.
that is very smooth, that she's just feeling the vibration, and he's, yeah, mesmerized as much as we are, and it's
Yeah.
almost like a rom-com kind of scene that I think she really
Yeah.
excels in. Her spunkiness, her stubbornness, their back and forths, and a key line I think is when she signs that she won't do anything that she can't do well, which is why she doesn't speak and be more connected to the world as he's
Mm-hmm.
trying to make her do. And for me, it's very rom-com heroine kind of setup. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
shame for me that she wasn't afforded, the opportunity to do more lighter work and rom-coms, even because I feel like, if she's a hearing actress, she would absolutely be primed for like a
Yeah.
big movie star career after this.
Yeah, she'd be getting like she'd be right up there with Julia Roberts, dominating the
Exactly.
rom-coms of the 90s. And like I love that you mentioned her spunkiness too, because there's a scene where Philip Bosco is playing like the head of the school, and there's a scene where he brings her into William Hurt's classroom because William Hurt has been, like he's demanding to teach her how to speak and whatever, and says that like that she's agreed to give him an hour for some teaching or whatever, and Bosco looks at Matlin and is like, and you're really looking forward to it, aren't you? As if she's like 4 years old. And she does this really great reaction where she like mimics panting like a pleased and eager dog. And it's
Yes,
so
I love that.
funny. It's so spunky is the perfect word for it. Like it's such like a hilarious moment. And it's exactly what you're talking about, where like if she was a hearing performer, that's a kind of scene where like she would have gotten Sandra Bullock roles in rom-coms and Julie
Yeah.
Roberts stuff and everything, and like she would have crushed him, and she could have crushed him just as well as we see in here. She's so good in scenes like that, and Hollywood just wasn't willing to give those kind of roles to a deaf actress, and it's a huge shame.
Yeah. And in that same scene, like she's lighting up a cigarette, and just like
Mm-hmm.
her general sass, I think, is just really fun to watch. And she just has such a magnetic presence because of that sense of self and her independence, really. Like her constantly storming away whenever she doesn't like wherever the conversation's going. I think that's just really, really fun stuff. But I also think she excels in those more dramatic scenes where she's getting into her past with her character, where regardless of, what you might think of the material itself, the way she's expressing it, I think, is really affecting. And
Exactly.
talking
Yeah.
about like how she has this sexual past where boys would be like lining up to be with her, and they took advantage of her and they mistreated her, and there's such a bitterness in her expression where she's, putting up this tough exterior, but she's suggesting, especially in her face, that, she was not okay with these interactions, and it's made her closed off to the world. And I just feel like a scene like that would have more impact, maybe even if we didn't have to hear him constantly telling us what she's saying.
Yeah.
But she has, again, like such a natural presence that for me, she does elevate the film and show the pain, beneath the mask. And to your point, like, she has so many moments, I think, where what she is expressing, we are able to understand in the audience, even if we don't literally understand what she's
Yeah.
expressing. And yet, William Hurt just like goes out and just says it all anyway. And it just like kind of flattens it almost for me.
Yeah, it feels so like it not only feels redundant, but it just like feels like it's yeah, like it's flattening is a really good word, where like it just feels like it's taking the air out of this really powerful moment that she just gave us. And then we have this asshole saying, his and like his little his little tone
In his
about it or
droll
whatever.
way.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's such a bizarre choice. And like it's frustrating too. Like we get a little bit more of her backstory with we get introduced to her mom, played by Piper Laurie, and like
Hmm.
they have a really fraught kind of past. But again, we're first introduced to her through William Hurt finding her, and like William Hurt being the one who gets to learn all of about like her backstory. And
Yeah.
like that is so like it's so frustrating. But then when Matlin and Laurie get a little bit of time together, like it really pops. And I mean, that's the credit to
It
like
does.
Piper Laurie is such a great, actor as well. And they have that weight of the history that they have together. And like we could have just seen that. We could have just seen that without William Hurt needing to be our kind of guiding hand through this world at any point.
Yeah, I pretty much made that exact note watching this, seeing that scene between her and Piper Laurie, who, you know, we just lost, rest in peace.
Yeah.
The two of them like mending fences, you know, just watching the two of them interact really made me wish even more that this film was centered on her, because it provides this like other dimension to her character with this loaded tension between them and her mother just trying to reach out and reconcile after all this time apart. And, you know, Sarah kind of coming to empathize with her mother. Like, it's a really fascinating dynamic that I wish we got more of. And instead we just get double down of like relationship drama that is so redundant after a while that I kind of just tune it out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very easy to tune out William Hurt, just saying.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I really like just as an actor in general, I really like William Hurt. And like obviously he was on like a tear in the 80s, you know, through
broadcast news next week.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very excited to hear you talking about Holly Hunter's performance in that. And like he's perfectly cast in broadcast news because it's like it is like absolutely lining up like his kind of like, I mean, you'll talk about it in the next episode, but like it's like he's perfectly cast in broadcast news. But here, that character is just such a putz, and like having the entire movie be through like his sort of like savior perspective is, it really robs the movie of so much. And like if we had gotten the movie as Matlin's character and like understanding her world and like her relationship with her mom, and then like the Hurt stuff is, you know, 30% of what the movie is versus it being 80% of what the movie is, because it's all through his perspective, trying to sell the romance. And if she doesn't end up with him at the end, you know, in my preferred version of the movie, like that would be just so much more effective, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I did just want to pinpoint, though, one of the fights that they have, which, again, get very exhausting, but she is afforded a really interesting opportunity where they're kind of talking about how she's frustrated that he seems to want to change her and make her an extension of him. She wants to, you know, have him let her be like a person, to be her own person. And she's so forceful in her signing, and she's kind of speaking to the problem of the film, obviously, which is, again, him speaking for her and isn't fully able to understand her truth. And, you know, obviously this is a scene where him speaking for her is most egregious, when he's just fully stating these full monologues for the benefit only of the audience, and there's no emotional truth to any of it. But then he starts to really become an asshole to her and says, you know, he wants her to understand his language, and she just lets out this like guttural scream, like she's just like exhaling all of this pent up emotion. I think that's a pretty affecting moment, personally.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting moment because it's like, I think that it's really powerful and her performance is really strong, but it also like in a weird way feels like, for me, this kind of like shitty, like emotionally manipulative ploy for like a hearing audience to like, oh, we're finally understanding everything that she's been going through, when like for me it's like, do we really need to like hear her wailing in order to like finally understand the pain that she's been going through? We like, I feel like her performance has been effectively communicating that the whole time, and it almost feels like it feels like he's finally getting what he wants out of her or whatever, you know. And I think that it is
true.
But again, like, to the power of Matlin's performance, I think that what she is doing transcends all of the kind of like the issues that I have with it, because she is so living in the truth of that character in that moment, that like you feel that like this feels like this sort of like desperate plea for her to get him to finally understand, like, is this what you want? Like, shut the fuck up. Exactly. Like, you know, kind of thing. Like, this is what you've been begging for, and like it's not who I am, and it's not what I want, you know, how I want to express myself. And so I think it is really powerful still.
I agree with what you're saying in terms of it feeling a little tropey almost for a hearing audience, but I also think in its own way, based on how I'm watching the film and him constantly talking over her, her finally getting like to overpower him in that moment does feel like it has impact,
she's
you
doing
know.
what we've been wanting to do the entire movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't particularly love the ending, as you kind of said as well. You know, as you might expect from a movie like this, they both end up separating and then they both miss each other, and we get the reunion at the school dance. You know, I think she plays it pretty well. It's not, you know, my preferred ending either, but you do see this pure expression of love in her face, in her expression, even as she's signing I love you. It just feels genuine. Obviously, it helps that they were, you know, in love at this time, her and William Hurt.
Yeah.
They obviously had a very tumultuous relationship, but you can definitely sense that there's some intimacy between them. Yeah, I don't know. I think, again, the writing of the film leaves a lot to be desired, and some of the direction, unfortunately. But what she's doing totally transcends that, and is like getting back to exactly what we said of Jane Fonda at the beginning of this episode of, it's not best actress in a great movie, it's just best actress.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Like I think that she sells every moment of this movie, even when it is like, even when intellectually I'm watching it like, oh, are you kidding me with this? Like these kind of tired
Yeah.
tropes, this garbage, but there's never a single second where I don't believe her performance. And that's almost in some ways even more impressive to kind of pierce through not great writing, not great direction, a scene partner who, like, he's a good actor, but like the character is just such a dud. And she is still able to be such a force on screen and so impressive. And me to like watch it and be like, I have no problem with this being an Oscar winning performance, even though I
There you
can't
go.
stand this movie. Like, it's
Right.
really impressive.
All right, well, let's transition into why she won this. Talk about this Oscar race. So, before the Oscars, to get into some precursors, Marlee Matlin did win the Golden Globe for drama. She was a LA Film Critics nominee. Sissy Spacek won the Golden Globe for comedy, and she won the New York Film Critics Award. Sigourney Weaver was a Golden Globe nominee. And here's something I haven't said on this show before. She won the Saturn Award, which is from the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, where, you know, Aliens was basically like the Titanic of its year. Like, it completely swept, as you might expect. But Kathleen Turner won with the National Board of Review, and she was a nominee at the Golden Globes, National Society of Film Critics, New York Film Critics. Plus, she was a Saturn Award nominee herself, because technically that movie is kind of sci-fi. And
True.
like you said earlier, Jane Fonda is the only one who didn't get a single mention leading up to the Oscars. So let's get into it. Why do we think Marlee Matlin was our winner from this group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's such a cool race to see, because it also is like everybody has very like disparate paths to get here, but it also, like, in kind of tracing, and especially in thinking about your next question, which is going to be who do we think like the runner, or the final question, which is who do we think is going to be the runner, like who we think the runner up was. It just feels like a blowout. Like, in every respect, it feels like an absolute blowout, that like Matlin,
Yeah.
like, there was no competition, just like precursors, but also just narrative. I mean, Children of a Lesser God's the only one of these that got nominated for Best Picture, which is like, a pretty big driving force, especially kind of in this era. Her co-star got nominated, but it also is just the thing of like, the Academy loves an ingenue. They love anointing a new, especially in Best Actress, they love anointing, a new, this is, our new, prized kind of star that we're anointing, and then we will barely have the industry do anything with her for, the next 20 years.
Hmm.
But like, also the element of audiences seeing something in her that we haven't seen before up until that point, or had rarely seen before, certainly not on this scale. And so it feeling like something more special and unique, and so it really draws your attention more. And then just, I mean, the power of it being a debut, like not even an ingenue, but like a debut performance. And so you're really just shocked to the core with, this is somebody, like, this is a star, this is, a star,
Mm-hmm.
this is somebody who can stand not only toe to toe with Sissy Spacek and Jane Fonda as her competition, but kind of knock them out of the water. And so I think that it just feels like a runaway to me, as to
Mm-hmm.
like why, but like there just really wasn't even a conversation, it seems like.
Yeah. Marlee, like, she has such an Oscar friendly character. a
Yeah.
very traditional arc. She has again, as I've said many times, such a natural screen presence and a fresh discovery, and is clearly in the film that the Academy loved the most of
Yeah,
any
it's a
of
very
these.
Oscar friendly movie too.
It
Yeah,
really
it's not,
is.
especially like in this field with like the like erotic mystery murder thriller and the sci-fi blockbuster and the sort of magical
Right.
realist,
Yeah,
comedy drama. Like it is definitely the most like straight down the middle for what the Academy goes for.
exactly. The whole idea of like setting anyone in the Academy down in front of it, you compare this to like Aliens or even Peggy Sue Got Married, that
Hmm.
fair or not are easier to dismiss based on
Hmm.
genre. The Morning After is a total non-factor. And then like with Sissy, she'd already won before. The Academy seemed to generally like Crimes of the Heart, but I don't know if they're what she does in the movie is like Academy Award level greatness. We need to give you a second Oscar. So yeah, it's pretty easy to see why she won, even factoring in her being an entirely new presence, a deaf actress. She's not part of the establishment at all. I will also just say I was doing research from old newspaper articles from that time,
Oh yeah.
and the discourse on Marlee, at least in like columns, is pretty gross, honestly. There's a lot of dismissing of her acting and saying that like she'll only win because of sentiment and because the Academy would consider it like a noble decision.
Yeah, I saw it, the one clipping that I saw you post on Twitter was comparing her to I can't remember his name, but the guy who won supporting actor for Best Years of Our Lives, the
Yeah, Harold
amputee.
Russell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's just like Jesus Christ. Like
Mm-hmm.
the thing too, like you can see how that element of something that they hadn't seen. And certainly I feel there's an element of like people at the time loving Children of a Lesser God because like as a hearing audience, it like makes you feel good about, embracing something or whatever. But like
Yeah.
the thing with her performance is like as we were saying, it transcends all of that. Like I even as somebody personally who really bucks up against feeling any of that kind of stuff in watching a movie, like all the tropes, all of the eye rolling kind of stuff about Children of Lesser God, like I despised it, and yet her performance to be like, yeah, completely rises above any of that, gets straight through it, and it's like there's no question that this performance won because people genuinely believed it was the best performance in the category, in my eyes.
Yeah. There's a particularly gross comment from Rex Reed
Yeah.
where he was like, it's nice that the girl got the job, but the nomination's wasted. How many roles can you find for a deaf mute actress? And she has fully like called out Rex Reed for his shitty comments, which
Good for
he
her.
also said after she won. He had a lot to say about it, and she was like, it did really hurt to see those words, and I feel for her because she had to deal with a lot, including the person that she's supposed to be in love with, William Hurt, reacting very negatively to her
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
He said, well, you've got the little man beside you. What makes you think you deserve it? There are hundreds of actors who have worked for years for the recognition you just got handed to you. Think about that.
Oh, good grief. It's
It's
crazy
really,
too. It's crazy
yeah.
that like not only does she have to like just in her memory, like, the win that she has for it is in a movie with him. And obviously in her memoir, there, she details all the sexual abuse and everything from the relationship as well. But then
Mm-hmm.
like he was the one because he won for Kiss of the Spider Woman. He's the one who gave her the Oscar,
Yep.
like on top of everything else. And like that, I was watching this the Academy did this like behind the speech, like this YouTube
Mm-hmm.
series they have where they interview. It's like contemporary interviews with people talking about their Oscar win moments. And I was watching it the other day with Matlin talking about hers, and it just is like it's tough. Like you can see that she has so much pride and so much pleasure in recalling that win, but then you think that like underneath there too there's a lot of like pain and it being so closely associated with not only her relationship with her but then also the Rex Reed shit, like all of that kind of stuff that
Mm-hmm.
surrounds something like that, and it's just such a shame.
Yeah. Very, very bittersweet, I
Yeah,
think. I mean, like, I'm glad, honestly, though, that Coda happened for her because that was
me
such a
too.
triumphant moment for her. Like, I've looked back and like seeing the Best Picture win, and she's like so emotional and moved by that. I guess I'm just glad that she at least got that kind of a positive experience that didn't seem to have any real, you know,
Yeah.
negativity behind it, other than people thinking that Coda maybe didn't deserve Best Picture, but that's different than what this was. You know what I
And
mean?
it's almost always gonna happen. And like
Yeah.
as somebody who doesn't think Coda deserved to win Best Picture, like every Best Picture, other than a couple of them, like there's pretty like other than like The Godfather and like I mean even Parasite, like some people are like. I mean, Rex Reed probably said some shit about it only won because it's Korean. Like,
Oh, God.
it's always
Yeah.
gonna be some stuff. But yeah, I think I was really happy to see her on kind of like the campaign trail and
Yeah.
get back in the spotlight with Coda. That was really nice.
Yeah, so will be interesting to see what we say who the runner-up was. I have gotten some sense that at the very least we can rule out Jane Fonda. I'm
Yeah,
just going to
yeah,
say that. I think that's
yeah.
fair. All right, let's get to some Twitter questions. Greg Adams said, could you make the argument that these 5 films are all different genres? Has there been another year so far where that was also the case?
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, if you pitch Crimes of the Heart as comedy,
Yeah,
versus which it did in Golden Globes, it competed in comedy musical, which isn't always, the greatest measure of
barometer,
whether,
right?
yeah, whether it's one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like if you lean Children of the Lesser God and Crimes of the Heart, I think are the two that are kind of closest.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you lean a little bit more towards one on the other, I could see you saying that they're all different genres. And I can't imagine that there's any other year
No.
before or after this where you could say anything remotely similar about any of the acting categories, probably.
Right. Yeah. This is just all over the place, which I think, again, is ideally what you want in an
Yeah.
Oscar race. You want this kind of variety
Five
because
different flavors.
there are great films, great performances in all different genres, not just tragic dramas.
Yeah.
So, West Side Woof said, how did Matlin squeeze past the others, all big players? Did she have the new face luck like Joanne Woodward, Anne Bancroft, Simone Signoret, etc.?
I mean, I think as we were saying, like part of that, but also part of, I mean, this is again like the movie that had the most support behind it too. So it doesn't, even though the names that she's up against are more, mountainous names, especially Fonda and Spacek, who have such a history. There also is the thing. I mean, I think we see it a lot in sort of like Oscar narratives where you see Brie Larson in 2015, like you see like sort of these newer faces go up against the ones who have been nominated plenty of times where they're like, okay, we don't need to give, Jane Fonda a third Oscar. Like it's
Right.
fine.
Yeah. I do think sometimes being the fresh new face does end up helping more than hurting because it's
Yeah.
just more exciting for people. It's an exciting narrative. It's why people are excited for like Lily Gladstone, even though she's been around a little bit.
Yeah.
This being her big breakthrough with Killers of the Flower Moon, people are really rooting for her. More
Mm-hmm.
so maybe than Emma Stone, even though people are rooting for her as well. But
Mm-hmm.
there's less of an urgency, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Fritz said, Marlee Matlin is still the youngest Best Actress winner. Any other actress you think should have the title instead?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I can't imagine so off the top of my head.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say Tatum O'Neal in Paper Moon,
See
who won in
that,
supporting,
yeah,
but
my
also
first
absolutely the
thoughts.
lead of that movie.
Yeah, my first thought was like Tatum O'Neal in Paper Moon and Haley Steinfeld in True Grit, who was nominated and supporting for a very obviously leading performance, and
Yep.
I think that she's incredible in it. So like those are kind of the first two that come to mind as like child,
Right.
younger. That I mean, Madeline was so young. Like it really is bewildering how young she is in this. So it's tough to think of too many that
Yeah.
are younger that I think are like Oscar winning caliber. I mean, I honestly Haley Steinfeld in The Edge of 17, I think is wasn't even
Ugh.
nominated or anything, but like she's fantastic in that. But yeah, there's not too many like younger than Matlin that I think are like Oscar winning caliber performances.
Christoph said, in what other years of the 1980s would Marlee Matlin have won?
Oh,
So
that's
I
interesting.
think this is implying that, could she have won in a stronger year, essentially? 1981, I think she would beat Katharine Hepburn for On Golden Pond, honestly, and probably 1984 over Sally Field in Places of the Heart. Those are two that I absolutely think she would have won over. But I do think she might face tougher competition in a lot of the others.
Yeah, definitely obviously not over Meryl and Sophie's Choice,
Yeah,
Spacek and Coal Miner's Daughter, McLean in terms of endearment. But yeah, I think and Geraldine Page was such like a has such a
it's her
narrative behind her
time.
too. Yeah, it's her
Yes.
time. Like I
Sharon
guess
Moonstruck is kind of tough to beat.
yeah, Sharon Moon. I mean, she beat Close Hunter. Like that's
Yep,
really tough.
yep,
Foster and Accused also feels like such like a it was gonna go to her. Like I feel like the
yeah,
kind of like those two Cher and Foster like maybe I could see, but I think the only ones that are like very clear cut. I agree with you on Hepburn and Field.
yeah,
But the other ones it's like there could be some toss up. Tandy and Driving Miss Daisy again, kind of like her time, kind of a thing, and like that movie
yeah.
obviously won Best Picture. So it's tough to fight against that, but yeah, tricky. That's a really good question, actually. That's a really good
Yeah.
question.
hmm Andrew Carden said, "How did Jane Fonda make the cut here? The Morning After wasn't really a critical or commercial success, and Fonda scored nothing among the precursors."
Yeah, I'm asking myself the very same question. They just love those workout videos.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a factor, but like The Morning After was released like very late in 1986, so it was a very late contender. I don't know if that may have been a factor of why she didn't get any precursor nominations. Also,
Mm,
sometimes recency bias can help certain contenders.
American Hustle. Getting like
American Hustle.
10
Yeah.
nominations.
Vice, you know.
Yeah. Oh my God, Vice. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, American Sniper, like all those ones. There's like, yeah. I think that's a good point. That I think maybe she kind of swooped in at just the right moment
Yeah.
to kind of pick it up and without any of the precursors. Maybe if she had been on the trail a little bit before that, she could have picked
Right.
up a Globe or whatever.
Christoph has a very funny question. Is this at the same time the best and the worst nomination of Jane Fonda's career?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly the funnest. It's the most baffling. I definitely think it's her worst nominated performance. Personally, I know you liked her. I think that she's all right. I know you liked her more than I did, but I think
Yeah,
compared to the other, like I think all of her other nominated performances are quite good to sensational.
yeah,
So I would say it's definitely her worst, but it's a very, I mean, even just like statistically, it's an extremely fun nomination. Like, how many other opportunities are there to see a nomination that does not have a single precursor, let alone a single precursor for the movie
right.
anywhere?
I
Like
know.
that kind of an enigma is just really fun.
Yes. Well, that leads us wonderfully into this next question from Fritz, who said, "This is Jane's final Best Actress nom so far. Rank her nominations."
Oh wow, okay.
Okay. Well, I'll go first if you need a
Yeah,
minute
just
if you want to
looking
give
up
yours
the
too.
other ones. Yeah.
I'm going to include On Golden Pond in this too. Let's just do all of them. My number one is Clute. I think that's an incredible win. Absolutely love it. One of my favorites in this category of all time. Number two, very close though. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Another all timer. Number three, I think The China Syndrome. I think she's really, really good in that. Four, I would say Coming Home, which I think she's good, just not quite like, needing a second Oscar per se, but solidly in the middle. Number five, I have The Morning After, because just it's so wild that it's so unique in her nomination tally that I don't want to rank it last personally. Number six, I have Julia, which I'm not really a fan of. I don't think that's totally suits her very well. And then number seven, I have On Golden Pond, where I feel like she's sort of just playing herself. Maybe that's controversial, but like, there's not a whole lot of stretching she's doing there. So that would be mine.
Yeah,
What
I
about
mean,
you?
I'm not gonna have a ton of variants. My number one is They Shoot Horses, Don't They? That's one of my favorite performances of all time and one of my favorite movies of all time. Two would be The China Syndrome for me.
Mm,
I think, I mean, that's as I said, even above They Shoot Horses, China Syndrome's the first like thing that I think of when I think of Jane Fonda. Third would be Clute, which isn't like it's not one of my favorite movies. I think it's a good movie. It's one of those movies that like I always revisit it thinking I'm going to like it more, and it's like finally going to be one of my favorites, and I end up just still thinking it's fine, but it's like it's a really tremendous performance, and there's a lot in her Clute performance that I wish I had gotten more effectively in the Morning After performance. For coming home, I also have fourth. You had fourth as well. I feel similarly that like it's good. I like it's a very like prototypical like Oscar winning movie, Oscar winning performance. Like it's really like straight down the middle. It's fine. And then yeah, the Morning After I probably would put fifth as well because it's just so fun.
Hey.
Like Julia, I'm with you. I don't like Julia as a movie. And it's sort of like the as Coming Home is like a prototypical like it's just fine Oscar movie to me. Julia is a prototypical like this is kind of a slog to get through Oscar
Yep.
movie to me.
Totally.
I agree that she's like a little bit miscast in it. Like she's fine. I don't know if there's really too many Jane Fonda performances that I would say are bad. And on Golden Pond, yeah, it just feels a little bit like, did we need to give her a nomination for that? Like
Eh,
it's not her
yeah.
movie. Like it's not, she's not really, I agree, she's not really stretching. It's just kind of fine. But like she's just there for me a little bit. It just feels like the
Yeah.
nomination could have gone to somebody else. But yeah, so I'd be pretty similar to yours.
Yeah. I like that. I'm glad I could coax The Morning After a few spots up.
Yeah,
um,
if you hadn't made that case for it, that it's like it's a wild and fun enough nomination that as just ranking the nominations, it kind of deserves it. I probably would have put it last. I probably would have just been thinking like quality of performance
yeah.
strictly, and maybe would have put it a little bit lower than on Golden Pond,
Yeah.
where I agree she's just kind of she's not phoning it in, but she's just kind of showing up and probably not having to do too much.
Yeah. Okay, Joey Gentili has a take. Jane Fonda was a woman robbed here. Train wreck of a movie, but a phenomenal performance, and this should have been her Oscar. Was she also robbed for a win for Youth in 2015?
Oh, see, that's an interesting one. I know there are big youth heads out there. I'm
Youth heads.
pretty mid on the movie, and I don't think she's particularly great in it, but I do love especially in our modern era, the supporting categories have become so dominated by leading performances,
Yep.
or supporting performances that have so much screen time, and I just love I love the William Hurt in History of Violence nomination. I love the
Hell
Beatrice
yeah.
Straight in Network. Like I just love the nominations where it's just like an actor comes in for 10 minutes, sometimes one scene, and just absolutely knocks it out of the park. And I think that I would really enjoy her having gotten a nomination for that. I don't think she would have deserved a win for it. I'm trying to think of the other nominees. I know Vikander won for The Danish Girl, which I think is a good
Mm-hmm.
performance, a very much a lead performance. I wish that she had
Yeah.
gotten nominated for Ex Machina instead. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know Rooney Mara and Carol again in that category, 100% a lead performance, probably more of a lead than Kate Blanchett in that movie to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I don't know if I would say Fonda deserved the win. How about you?
Yeah, not a win for Youth, but I would have been thrilled with a nomination. At
Yeah.
least it would have been an actual supporting performance, unlike Vikander and Mara,
Yeah.
who I agree are very good, but have no business whatsoever being in this category.
Yeah. Good grief.
um, yeah. Lila said after this nomination, Jane Fonda famously took a break from acting from 1991 to 2005. Cast her in a Best Actress nominated role during this period of time.
Wow. Okay. Let me pull
Also,
up
do you think that with the right movie and at the right time, she could have been able to pull off a possible third win? I don't know. Probably not. But what I landed on here was I'm going to say the Diane Keaton role in Something's Gotta Give.
See, that's perfect. I was thinking, especially when I think of like, I really love her in 80 for Brady. I like that movie a lot, and like that, but like Something's Gotta Give is like the apex of a very like a frothy like you like a Sunday afternoon kind of movie. I think that she would have been so good in that. There's a lot of like very young, very young nowadays. Oh, I like
That's the
honestly
thing.
the Annette Bening in American Beauty, I think would be
Boy.
I think she
Wow, that would
would
be interesting.
capture that quite well.
Opposite
Um
Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, actually, okay. The following year, Joan Allen in The Contender, which is a performance I
Mm.
absolutely
Mm-hmm.
adore. I think that
Yeah,
Fonda would have been great in that role as well. So that's probably the one that I would land on
I
personally.
like that too. Okay. Joey Gentili said, Sissy Spacek drinking peanuts in Coke. Bitch, what?
Perfect question. That's a great question. I did. I at one point I wrote
Did
in
you
my
make a note of that too?
I wrote assorted creams, not nuts. Just that's a quote from Chrysler. I don't even remember where that came from, but I was just like, that's a very odd line.
Yeah, apparently this is a thing in the South. It's called Farmer's Coke.
Farmer's
Um,
Coke.
Apparently it became a trend again a few years ago. It actually has its own Wikipedia page, Peanuts and Coke, that I found. Yeah, you just, put peanuts in the Coke and something about the sweet and the salty makes something special. I don't know.
I kind of buy that actually. I feel like
Yeah,
that I could see that working together, those flavor profiles.
yeah. Ben Miller said, how much does the absolute ick of SpaceX movie distract from her performance?
I like mildly, but I wouldn't say too much. I feel like we both were pretty complimentary towards her performance. And it's I mean it's not,
Yeah,
it's not one of the greatest performances she's ever given or anything. So I don't think like the quality of the movie is detracting from the quality of the performance. I think that it is a good performance in a very mediocre movie.
yeah, I would say so. Obviously, it's like the whole affair with the teenage boy doesn't really go interrogated very much, so I guess that's a little bit ick, but
Yeah, it's kind of
I don't think
easy
it's.
to brush past it, especially like what we were talking about. Like she's very disarming, and so it's very easy to just kind
Mhm.
of like move past it quickly.
Yes. This is a very fun one from Steve. No, not that Steve, the other one. Um, should Jessica have gotten out of the limo? Okay, context. So this comes with a photo that Steve attached with an excerpt from the book Inside Oscar. Let me read this real quick. So it says Jessica Lange sabotaged her chances with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association by arriving for a press conference and then refusing to budge from her limo when she heard she was expected to pose for individual photos with every member of the association. Spacek happily complied and smiled along with the journalists. She was the only one from the cast nominated by the group for its Golden Globe Award, which she ultimately won.
Wow. I mean,
So,
honestly, I for a Golden Globe contention, I fully believe that Lang tanked her chances there with that particular group of people. Also, like
yep,
how absurd for them to demand that to take a
yep,
photo with every single person. That's out of control. But it's very
mm-hmm.
Golden Globes.
It really is derogatory. Um,
Yeah, always.
so to answer, like, if Jessica should have gotten out of the limo, absolutely not. And
Yeah,
I say good for
no.
her.
Yeah, keep your pride, girl. No
Yep,
disrespect to Sissy Spacek for doing it.
of course. Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
um, okay, Luke Val said, given how much the Academy liked to nominate Jessica Lange in this decade, and with Crimes of the Heart getting 2 acting noms, do you think Lange was in striking distance of making this lineup?
I mean, striking distance, I guess, is relative. I would say she was probably in the top 10 somewhere, but I think
Yeah,
it feels like they were like, and even just kind of collectively, the horse was being backed on SpaceX for it. So I don't necessarily think she was like sixth or seventh, but probably I think she was above Keaton for sure.
definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, she didn't even get any nominations anywhere else for this,
exactly. Yeah. So it feels
so
like she probably
hard to
wasn't
even say.
that close, but
Yeah,
close
but
enough,
look,
probably just on
the
merit of
Academy
name.
in the 1980s were obsessed with Jessica Lange, so it
Yeah.
would not be surprised if she was in the top 10.
Yeah.
Matt Stillman has a very simple question. Should Kathleen Turner be an Oscar winner?
Yes. 100%.
Yes.
No
Totally agree.
questions asked. Yeah.
Yes. I guess expanding further on this, Andrew Carden said, why do you think it took so long for Kathleen Turner to finally land an Oscar nomination?
I think that the kinds of roles that she was doing, I mean, Preeti's Honor is probably the most surprising one that she didn't get in with how favorable
Yeah.
they were towards that movie. But like in general, she had a really sort of intense, very, direct like approach to her acting. Like I think Body Heat, she deserved to win for that, but I can see why they would all like maybe be too intimidated by like the raw sexuality of that character for them to nominate
Yeah.
her in 1981. And similar, I mean, something like Crimes of Passion. Like I think she was just a little bit like too brazen of a performer for them to warm to her immediately, and it kind of took coming around to a movie like this for it to happen. And like obviously like Romancing the Stones, like a huge hit, but it's not really like a big like Oscar performance kind of a movie.
Yeah. She just seemed to weirdly not be exactly on the average Academy voters
Yeah.
wavelength, I suppose. So, and this, as weird and a little bit high concept as this movie is a little more palatable.
Yeah, it's even still surprising to me that she got nominated for this one, but a very
Yeah.
a very happy surprise.
Yeah. Well, Fritz said, if Kathleen Turner only gets one Oscar nomination, is this the correct movie?
Oh, that's a really tricky question. I think for me, Body Heat is her best performance, but I kind of just love that she got nominated for this movie. And so I kind of would
Yeah.
rather the nomination be for this than for Body Heat personally.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty happy with this. She has
Yeah.
plenty of options though, like, Romancing the Stone, Serial Mom, why
Oh
not?
yeah, she's so great in Serial Mom. Yeah.
So Jimmy said, shouldn't Kathleen Turner have received extra votes for having to act opposite that Nicolas Cage performance?
Yeah. I think that she would also say yes to that.
Yeah, bonus points.
Yeah.
I think so. David Pusak said, if you could give Marlee Matlin and Kathleen Turner at least one more Oscar nomination in lead or supporting, what would it be for, and who would they replace from the official lineup?
Oh, that's a good question.
I would say certainly Coda for Marlee, probably replacing like Judi Dench in Belfast.
Yeah.
Would be an easy swap for me. I mean, Kathleen, I would gladly put in 1984, which is a horrific lineup. And I might be bold and take out Sally Field in Places in the Heart and just see what that would do to the race.
Yeah, I think for
That's what I'll say.
me, Kathleen, I like that answer because I mean my first go was just like Body because that's my favorite performance
Yeah,
of hers. But then you look at the lineup for 81, and
it's a good lineup.
that's a really good line. Like maybe I would take Marsha. I mean, Marsha Mason's like the only one, and I mean Hepburn and On Golden Pond. Maybe I would. I'm just like, do we need her to
Yeah,
have another nomination? So I think maybe I would probably give it to her in Body Heat and take Hepburn and On Golden Pond out of there. And then yeah, I mean Matlin, let me just refresh myself real quick on who the other supporting actress nominees were for the Coda year, but I can't imagine there's anybody that I think would deserve to be pulled out less than Judi Dench.
Jessie Buckley, I think, was that year for The Lost Daughter.
Oh yeah,
Ariana DeBose was the winner.
Ingenue
Kirsten
Ellis and
Dunst,
King Richard. Yeah,
Ingenue Ellis.
I
Yep.
really like all those other performances. So yeah, Judi
Yeah.
Dench and Belfast definitely pull out for
Yep.
Matlin and Coda.
Three people had pretty much the exact same question, so I condensed it all. Blues Labyrinth, Kareem Balak, and Amar all basically asked the same question, which is Weaver's Oscar nomination the coolest of all time?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably going to be the coolest of all time for Infinity.
Probably. And then Cody Derricks and Celluloid Siren both want us to list other performances like Weaver's from either sci-fi or action movies that we think should have gotten Oscar nominations in this category.
Oh wow, in this category. That's a good question.
Well, I have a pretty easy one for me, which is Charlize Theron for Mad Max Fury Road.
Mm-hmm. I would Sandra Bullock in Speed, I think. Like
Wow,
it's like an
I like
action
that too.
one. I think that she is so great in that. I would definitely put that in there.
Yeah. I think if Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is action, I would put in Michelle Yeoh.
Definitely. Other like action block. I'm not the biggest like blockbustery kind of person.
Yeah.
Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow, I think, is one that
Oh,
I would
yes.
definitely say I would think
Really good one.
really deserves to be in there. That's like almost like a, and thinking of just Tom Cruise partners, Rebecca Ferguson, and I mean, I guess that's more supporting. Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, that's
Yeah,
supporting, but I think that she is traumatic. Like I had her on my personal, lineups for that year for sure.
I would also just like to note that she is really good in Doctor Sleep, which is a horror movie,
She's
but
so good in Doctor Sleep.
I'll count that in that mix of like sci-fi actiony like genre stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, Jordan said, "Do you think Sigourney was better in Alien? Would you have nominated her in that year?" I would say Aliens is better for her as a showcase, but I'd probably nominate her for Alien too, just because.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. I think that I would nominate her for Alien as well. I think it's an incredible performance there, but I think that she gets more to do as a performer in Aliens.
Yeah,
I think that the arc of that character, like it feels like it's more of an emotional arc for the character in Aliens, and so like just that journey for her feels more pronounced in Aliens. So I think that Alien is my preferred movie of the two. But I think
yeah,
that her
me too.
performance in Aliens, I think, is the my preferred performance of the two.
Mm-hmm. Joey Gentili said, in 1979, Siggy was campaigned for supporting actress for Alien. Was she the lead or supporting actress in the movie?
I mean, I feel like she's absolutely lead, right? Like it's an interesting one where
Eh,
I could see it go either
could see
way
either way.
because
Yeah,
she's the final girl, but it's like a whole subversion tactic where it feels like they're kind
yeah,
of all supporting to a degree, and you're kind of seeing everybody
yeah,
get picked off one by one. Like maybe Scare, it's the lead for a bulk of it, but like you're kind of seeing them all get picked off one by one, and like I can imagine watching it in 1979 having a very exciting sense of not knowing who's going to survive because it feels very scattered and random. So I mean, I don't necessarily, I don't think it's as egregious as Julia Roberts being pushed supporting for her August Osage County, but I would still
yeah.
probably put her lead, and maybe that's because she's the one who survives at the end of it all.
I would put her in supporting because I think saying that she's a lead is a spoiler.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay, I like that. That's why. So that's why you think you famously think Janet Leigh should be lead in Psycho, right?
Sure,
I
why not?
think that would have been a hoot if Janet Leigh got
Yeah.
nominated for lead. It's like
Hey, she's the lead actress of
she
the movie.
she certainly is.
Loophole. Um, yes. Let's see. Miles McHale said, "Will we ever get another Best Actress fighting a giant space monster?"
I mean, you would think no, but I don't think that Michelle Yeoh fighting a giant space monster would have been out of place in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I guess never say never. I mean, I would
Good
have
point.
before last year, I would have never thought that we'd get a Best Actress winner who had hot dog fingers. So
Yeah, and like wielding a butt plug.
yeah, yeah.
So I say anything's possible from here
Anything
on
is
out,
possible.
right? But Jeremy Kaplan said, "Name one Best Actress winner from each of the 50s, 60s, and 70s decades whom you would have liked to have seen as the lead in a sci-fi action movie."
50s, 60s, and 70s. Is that what it was?
Yep.
Okay.
Here's what I got. For the 50s, I'm going to say Ingrid Bergman. Because there's something about her sensibility that I think would just be really fun and goofy in like a sci-fi movie that I would enjoy personally.
For the 50s, I'll say Simone Signoret. I think that she has a very
Hmm,
like a very steely reserve to her that I
good
think
point.
could play really
Yes.
well as like a badass in an action sci-fi film.
Hmm. Personally, I'm just going for camp for these.
Fair enough.
Because for the 60s, I have Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of think I would go the same. Like that's out of the crop here. I don't know if there's
Hmm.
anybody who would be more fun to see
Yeah,
in an action sci-fi than Elizabeth Taylor, especially in like her kind of era of just taking paycheck roles. Like you could also
absolutely.
see her doing it, I think.
Hmm. The 70s, I'm going with my girl Faye Dunaway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, Fonda Barbarella, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
going
that kind of already happened.
kind of going there. Yeah, Faye Dunaway would be really good in a sci-fi for sure. I could see her too being in it, like in that era. Liza in a sci-fi would be hysterical.
Oh, geez. Wow. That's quite an image. Okay. Fritz said recast the 5 nominees in the 5 nominated roles.
Yeah, that's always a fun experiment, I think.
Yes, shuffling them around. Probably wouldn't love anyone playing deaf necessarily, but considering that's the exercise, I guess here we are. I think kind of you could swap Marlee Matlin and Sissy Spacek. Feels like an easy switch for me.
Yeah, I was thinking Spacek in Children of Lesser God too. I think for
Yeah,
me, I would probably put Matlin maybe in The Morning After, actually. I mean, I guess she's really young for that
she's
role,
very
but
young, but maybe like now
yeah,
she
yeah,
could do
yeah.
it.
Maybe now I feel like she would capture that role pretty well.
Jane Fonda can use her Barbarella experience for Aliens,
Yeah, for sure. I feel like
right?
that's an obvious one. And
Yeah,
then I guess for me, then it would be Turner in Crimes of the Heart, which kind of I feel like that works
yeah,
all
that could
right.
work.
And then
Hmm.
Weaver and Peggy Sue Got Married, which isn't like that doesn't feel great for me, but it's all I got left. So
Yeah, that's kind of how I landed too. But I
yeah.
put Kathleen Turner in The Morning After, which would be fun to
Yeah,
see.
I think she would be really good in that for sure.
Yes, especially, in her more mature days with that deep, raspy voice.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that could work
absolutely.
really well. But yeah, Sigourney and Peggy Sue Got Married. Hey, she did what she did with Aliens. I think she could pull off Peggy Sue Got Married too.
Yeah, she'll figure it out.
Chell said, rank my hot girls. Okay, so in the grand tradition of hot girl shit, as Chelsea always likes to have me rank, I'd say in terms of hot girl shit, Sigourney Weaver in Aliens is like S tier hot girl. From there, I do think it gets a little tough. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
If
I
you're familiar with the concept of hot girl shit, sometimes people are thrown off by
no, no,
that.
no. Yeah, absolutely. I think that Weaver and Aliens is 100% the no brainer. Like it's the only one that I think actually qualifies for
Yeah.
that designation out of this, and then you're kind of ranking
Hmm.
like who gets closest to. I think two for me would be between Matlin and Fonda. I feel like
Sure.
Spacek and Turner are kind of on the lower end. Probably Spacek last, and then Turner
Hmm.
fourth, maybe. I just don't know where I land between Matlin and Fonda as second or third.
I think like before she gets involved with William Hurt, she's Marlee Matlin is kind of hot girl shit to me.
Yeah, kind of
you know,
dampers it down a little bit.
yeah. So I don't know. The Jane Fonda in The Morning After, like she does whatever the hell she wants, which is a central tenet of hot girl shit, I think.
Yeah.
But she's also like a complete mess and
Yeah,
arguably in a
too
bad way.
messy, I
So
think. Matlin, she's got enough like
yeah,
oomph for her, enough like
yeah.
kick-ass kind of energy.
Rob Montoya, another casting question here. Fast forward to 2023. All 5 of these films are made today. Who would you cast in each of these films?
Oh God.
Okay, so here's what I have prepared. Sharon Stone in The Morning After.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that that's really good. I think that especially a thing with The Morning After where like I struggle with Fonda a little bit is like she's Jane Fonda, right? Whereas like
Yeah.
somebody like Sharon, so like casting that today, I think would be well suited for somebody like a Sharon Stone who was like an it star for a time and has kind of had that star kind of wash away like the
Fading.
character
Right.
has. Yeah.
Right,
And so
exactly.
I think she could capture that really well. And she's a tremendous actress who deserves. I mean, it's
Yep.
obviously not a great part. It's not a great movie, but like a plum leading role for
She would
sure.
do it. She
Yeah.
would eat it up.
Yeah.
For Children of a Lesser God, I have Millicent Simmons.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of tough. Like there's
It's
not an
tough.
abundance of known like name deaf actresses right now, so I think
Yeah.
that that's, and
But
I mean
she's
she's,
around that age.
yeah, and she's excellent in the Quiet Place movies and Wonderstruck too, so
Hmm. For Crimes of the Heart, a little tough. I landed on Amanda Seyfried. I think it would
Oh,
be fun.
I like Amanda Seyfried.
Yeah.
I think that's the toughest one, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
we're just not even getting movies like that anymore. Like, I think like an
Exactly.
Amy Adams would be like fine.
Mm,
But yeah.
well, ironically, that's who I had for Peggy Sue Got
Oh
Married.
no.
So, Amy Adams, you know? I don't know if she could still accurately play like a teenager necessarily, but
Yeah,
um
that's one of the fascinating things about Peggy Sue is that Kathleen Turner is able to capture both the ages of that character with like
yeah.
no, like you don't question it at all.
Yeah. And for Aliens, I say do not remake it. We do not want another Ellen Ripley. I think that is a bad idea. But you know what? If we want to just go in a completely different direction with it and just like, do away with the idea that this is that Ellen Ripley, I want to see like Lupita Nyong'o do something like this.
That's like genuinely nuts because I was going to say Lupita Nyong'o. Like
Oh my god.
I was thinking like like who in genre world has given a performance that I think is like Oscar caliber. So I went to her and Us, obviously, which I
Wow.
think should
Yeah.
get nominated. So yeah, I mean that's actually
I
bizarre
think
that
this needs
we
to
had the
happen
same thought.
now.
Yeah, I mean I think we just manifested it right there.
Mhm.
I also
Yeah.
randomly, as we were talking, I thought Gina Gershon would be really good in The Morning After as well.
Ooh, I
I
like
really like
that.
that a lot. But yeah.
Mhm. Let's see what another recasting one from Joey Gentili, who said recast these 80s Oscar talents and Karen Black in the roles above. So Karen Black, Oprah Winfrey, Eva Le Gallienne, Anne Southern, Frances McDormand.
Oh, that's I feel like Karen Black would be really good in Crimes of the Heart. Just thinking
I was going to
about
say The Morning After, but that works too.
that, yeah, that really works too. God, yeah. I watched
Yeah.
Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean kind of recently. And so like I'm very in
Hmm.
like Karen Black in stage adaptation roles, but then also you kind of get her in like
Yeah.
wino alcoholic mode in Morning After, which
Right.
I think she would be really great at as well.
Yeah. Easiest for me got to be Frances McDormand in Aliens, right?
Yeah,
Like,
she feels like the only one out of that crew who could really pull that off, I
yeah.
think.
A younger Eva Le Gallienne in Crimes of the Heart, I guess. A younger Anne Southern in Children of a Lesser God, but like,
Yeah,
not really.
the ages kind of trip you up on a lot of
Yes.
these. Like even like
This
yeah.
feels like it was made with like a randomizer.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Oprah Winfrey and Peggy Sue Got Married.
Yeah, which I get like, I have to be much younger, but I think
Yeah,
that
in the 80s, I guess. Yeah.
right, yeah. I think she could pull it off.
Yeah, why not? Patrick Ross said, I feel like this is a rather weak year. Great actresses, but not their best work. How would you feel about Melanie Griffith in Something Wild, Bette Midler in Ruthless People, or Farrah Fawcett in Extremities in one of those slots? I've only ever seen Something Wild from those three, personally. Would be fun to see her get in there. I think Ray Liotta was somewhat on the radar to maybe sneak into supporting for that, so maybe she
Yeah.
was on the radar. She also got a Golden Globe nomination. Would be fun to throw her in the middle of this chaotic lineup.
Yeah. I think I also have only seen Something Wild out of those three. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that she would fit really well with the spirit of this lineup. And I
Yeah,
think that she's
yeah.
great. I mean, I won't say, I guess, what my personal nominees are in case there are other snub questions where this come up,
Okay.
but I do have like my own five and several. I mean, it's a really good year in the category, I think.
Yeah. Tess of the Dysfunctional said, should Isabella Rossellini have gotten a nomination for Blue Velvet?
So Isabel Rossellini is my personal win
I
in this,
figured.
yeah, in this
Oh, your win.
category. And I
Nice.
mean, Isabel Rossellini in Blue Velvet is probably top five leading actress performances of all time for me. So yeah, I think that
Mm.
she absolutely should have gotten. And it's the Blue Velvet thing is an interesting sort of little moment where it only got the director nomination, and even Hopper
Mm-hmm.
got nominated for Hoosiers instead of Blue Velvet, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a performance, it's a character that they never would have gone for, the Rossellini one or the Hopper one, but especially the Rossellini one. But she absolutely should have gotten nominated for it.
I totally would have loved it. Absolutely. Like, more David Lynch performances should have been nominated for
Yeah.
Oscars. Would have been really nice also to see her, considering the legacy of her mother, Ingrid Bergman, in this category. Would be
Yeah.
nice to see her here too.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Mm-mm.
The ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, said, was this Mia Farrow's best chance to get into Best Actress? Why did she miss, do you think? So she was in contention for Hannah and Her Sisters, which was a big, it swept the supporting categories. One original screenplay is a big hit with the Oscars, but once again, Mia Farrow completely overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what you think. Like, I kind of feel like with Hannah and Her Sisters being such an ensemble, I don't know if I feel like this was like her best shot. I feel like maybe like Purple Rose of Cairo, maybe I feel
Yep.
like she was like that's more like her movie. So I feel like maybe she would have gotten a better shot, a better chance of getting it. It's still, I mean, it's always been one of the most bizarre things in the world to me that she never got an Oscar nomination, given all of
Yep.
the Woody Allen love and the Woody Allen performance love that they, have bestowed on his films. But yeah, I would say I think Purple Rose of Cairo is probably her best chance at getting in.
I agree. Yeah. And with Hannah and Her Sisters, so much of the focus was on Diane Wiest,
Exactly. Yeah.
who won supporting. She got a lot of the attention. For Mia Farrow, she got good reviews, but it was like, it's another Mia Farrow performance in a Woody Allen ensemble movie. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Tony Cunett said, why does the Academy hate Mia Farrow so much?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I
Weird
could,
personal baggage. I don't know.
yeah, it's really strange. Maybe Sinatra did something
Yeah.
to make it happen.
No, I mean, I think headlines, her personal life, things like that could have had a factor maybe.
Yeah.
Kenneth Israel said, do you think snubbed legend Anne Bancroft was sixth? Did she pay the price this year after her previous filler nom the previous year? So this would have been for Night Mother, which I also haven't seen, but I've heard is bleak.
Yeah, I was reading, I haven't seen it, but when I was reading through reviews of Crimes of the Heart, a lot of people were comparing it to Night Mother because it's also like a stage adaptation. It's also like Spacek's character attempts suicide in both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she probably was six, right?
Maybe. Yeah. She got a Golden Globe nomination in drama. She is really well loved by the Academy, so
yeah,
seems plausible.
It's kind of a tough one to parse who is six because the nominees themselves are a little bit erratic. So it's tough to say. But
if Jane Fonda in The Morning After can be fifth, who knows who was sixth?
Yeah, exactly.
Adam said, the Academy seems to have made a clerical error and forgot to nominate Meryl this year. Did she deserve a nomination for Checks Notes Heartburn?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there genuinely are quite a few Meryl performances where I think that she deserved to get nominated, and I became frustrated. Like ones where she didn't get nominated, and I'm like, you guys nominated her for everything. Like, why wouldn't you nominate her for this? Like Hope Springs. I think that she is incredible in, and I kind of really love that movie. But a Heartburn, no, I don't think that she deserved to get nominated for Heartburn. It's fine. Then honestly, I wouldn't bat an eye if she did get nominated for it. Especially, she gets nominated for Ironweed the next year, which is not the greatest performance or the most interesting movie. But yeah, I don't think she got robbed of a nomination for Heartburn or anything.
No, I think she's fine in Heartburn. It does sort of feel like a precursor to those lighter kind of It's Complicated, Hope Springs kinds of movies she would do, but it's also not particularly funny, and I don't think she has super great chemistry with Jack Nicholson.
No,
but
it's not. Yeah, it's definitely lower tier Mike Nichols for me.
Yeah. Okay, one more here from Test of the Dysfunctional. 1986 saw the birth of one Stephanie Germanotta, aka Lady Gaga. Which of these 5 movies would you remake today for Lady Gaga to star in?
The Morning After, of course. I feel like she would be great in The Morning After.
That was going to be my answer as well. But make the script better.
Yeah, exactly. I think she would. That's perfect role for her.
Yep, and she would tear it up on that press tour talking about preparing for that role. All right, let's move on to our final segment where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Mitchell, very curious to hear what you're going to say here, because could be any of them except for Jane Fonda.
Yeah,
Who
I
do you think
think
it is?
definitely not Fonda. For me, the two that I'm kind of tossing up, I mean, if Spacek hadn't won already, I think it's a no-brainer, Spacek. But even with the win this decade, just looking at the rest of them, I feel like the kind of movie, the kind of performance, the fact that it got a supporting actress nomination and a screenplay nomination, I kind of feel like Spacek was probably still the runner up personally, which again demonstrates how far ahead of the game Matlin was, because I just don't see
Yeah.
how Spacek could have possibly won for that. Like Kathleen Turner and Peggy Sue Got Married, it just doesn't feel like it got a couple other nominations. The cinematography nod, I think, is really telling of like support for the movie. Because like that kind of a movie getting a cinematography nod is surprising and well deserved. I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
gorgeously shot. I think she maybe would be the other one that I would think. I just don't think that like Weaver getting in for Aliens is such a yeah, like a rare gem of a nomination. I just don't think that she was that close to getting the win. It feels like the nomination was kind of the reward for that. And then as we said,
Mm-hmm.
Fonda, no shot in hell.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. For me, the runner up was, I agree, between probably Sissy Spacek and Kathleen Turner. I'm actually going to give the edge to Turner here, if only because she had a narrative on her side of finally getting a nomination after
Mm-hmm.
having starred in a series of hits, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Marlee has also said in her memoir that for her, the odds on favorite going into the night was Kathleen Turner.
Oh wow. I mean, that's I don't know if that's I don't know if she's being
That's what she
100%
said.
honest
I don't know.
there,
Maybe
but
she's being humble, but
yeah.
um, I don't think there was very much urgency, honestly, to get Sissy a second Oscar. Maybe I'm biased because I don't really see it as a super impressive performance. But for me, that's just not the kind of performance in my eyes that gets someone a second Oscar per se.
Yeah. I
So,
agree. It's a weird thing where it's like, because then also Turner, like it's her first nomination, but then it also ends up being her only nomination. And so it's like, how
mm,
much support was there really for Turner in general? But then that's kind of thinking about like what comes in her career after, where kind of
yeah.
Hollywood, cast her aside a bit. So yeah, I definitely think it's between those two. And
Hmm.
I hope that it was Kathleen Turner. I really hope that it
Yeah,
was.
I think so. And I think the argument that you could make about, like, oh, Sissy Spacek won the Golden Globe over Kathleen Turner. Well, Sissy Spacek also schmoozed all the voters, and
Yeah.
Kathleen Turner has won this category 2 years in a row up to this point. So they're not going to
Yeah.
give her a third in a row.
And they both
So
had like
that's
a
what I would say.
couple like significant critics wins, so I think they kind of cancel each other
Right.
out a little bit in the run up to it. Like precursors are really not super useful in this year to determine who
Right.
the runner up was.
Well, I will ask you the final question here. Who would you have voted for from this lineup?
I mean, I think, and I imagine potentially it's the same for you. One, I think it's, I think that it's my favorite performance, like straight up at the five, but also just for novelty reasons, I would vote for Sigourney Weaver and Aliens, like no questions asked. The only toss up for me is Turner and Peggy Sue, who like I'm kind of, back and forth between which one of those is my favorite performance out of them, but I still would probably land on Weaver anyway.
Yeah, it's also between those two for me as well, which is easy to parse from our conversation.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I would also vote for Sigourney Weaver. I think,
kind of have
I'm not going
to.
to pass up that opportunity to vote for that kind of a performance specifically. And just, I think on merit, she is doing the most heavy lifting of anyone here.
Yeah,
And elevating her film beyond like what a film like this typically would be. And so I think it's such a special nomination that, like you said, I just have to vote for it.
yeah.
But Kathleen Turner, super close, super, super close.
Any other
So,
year, yeah. I'd love to see
yep,
what the vote. I mean, I know we'll
that's
never
what
know,
I.
but I would love to see what the vote tallies were for this year.
Yes. Mitchell, this was such a fun journey through 1986 with you. I really appreciate it. I think we got into some good discourse here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really love the dive. I'll say I love this podcast because I just love the length that you and your guests go to, and like how like everybody really
Yes.
like you really dive into the full spectrum of the performances that you cover. And I think some years for you that's probably pretty tough, especially some of these early 80s ones where there's
Yep.
ones that are a little bit difficult to dedicate the time to, you know, give them their
Hmm.
fair shake. But I think this was a extremely fun year to go through this category with you.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. Where can people find more of you on the internet?
You can, I mean, if Twitter's still around by the time this drops, who knows? Any day now. You can find me on Twitter at it is Mitchell. I pretty much, I mean, anything that I write or work on, I'll promote on there. So I would just say follow me there. Follow me on Letterboxd at Mitchell.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find me at Kevin_Jacobson pretty much everywhere. And the podcast is at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, Instagram at And the Runner Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard and want to hear more, go to patreon.com/And the Runner Up is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. And next week, we'll be discussing the Best Actress lineup of 1987, where the nominees were Cher in Moonstruck, Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, Holly Hunter in Broadcast News, Sally Kirkland in Anna, and Meryl Streep in Ironweed, with the winner being Cher. So with that, thanks again, Mitchell.
Thank you so much.
And I will bid you all adieu.